May, where he visited Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, and clearly has very strong ties with the leaders of those countries. And he has referenced what they will need to do now. He has talked about the wealth in that region and how that will be very important in the rebuilding of Gaza. So you can imagine he's going to put the lean on these leaders that he believes he has significant influence with. I think that was also important to getting to this point when you look at his relationship with the leaders of Turkey, Jordan, Egypt, and those countries that I had just mentioned, Qatar especially, to get to the point for the mediation and negotiation with Hamas. But now those relationships are going to come to significant play in the rebuilding and in the security and governance, which, as everybody here has been talking about, is a lot of unknowns and very complicated. And this is not something that the United States is, yes, there's the Board of Peace. And yes, the president's talking about being, the head of this. But in terms of the actual direct role, I think you're seeing the president sort of pass this off to the countries in the region for the actual oversight of what comes next there. Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, Steve Witkoff, his special envoy, will play a big role in all of this. We heard Witkoff say he is dug in and that he will be spending a lot of time there at the direction of the president. But now it's when it gets very complicated, those negotiations and getting things on paper going forward.
And General Lute, I'm out of time, but quickly, we also heard the president talking about the U.S. strikes on Iran being critical to also making today possible. How does Iran factor into all of this now?
Well, clearly, Iran was the main sponsor of proxy groups across the region, which were all against Israel. So Hezbollah to the north in Lebanon, the Assad regime in Syria, as Hamas itself, the Houthis in Yemen and so forth. So with the weakening of the central government in Tehran, its ability to support these proxy groups, these outlying groups, has very much weakened, and it has, I think, contributed to this opening that we see today as they all convene in Sharm el-Sheikh.
All right, Doug Lute, Mary Jordan, Karen Travers, James Longman, thank you all. And we will bring you that signing ceremony in Egypt as soon as it happens. In the meantime, let's bring in CEO of the American Jewish Committee, Ted Deutsch, for more. Ted, I know you were in the room during President Trump's speech at the Knesset today. What was that like? And what do you hope happens at the summit in Egypt today?
Well, it was an incredibly energized feeling to be in the Knesset with the President of the United States and hearing him talk about the need to build upon the return of the hostages today, the need to return the rest of the remains of the hostages, but then also to build upon peace that exists right now, and making clear to everyone in the room the same thing that he took with him to Sharm el-Sheikh, which is his commitment to continuing to push toward peace. For all of the people that he's meeting with in Sharm el-Sheikh, most importantly right now is keeping the pressure on Hamas, keeping the pressure on them to return the hostages, to abide by the terms of the deal, and ultimately to lay down their arms. The Gaza cannot be rebuilt with Hamas there. That's a message that he took with him to Sharm el-Sheikh. He painted a very bright picture for what the Middle East and the world could look like. Now, his leadership and the commitment of those in Sharm el-Sheikh right now together can help make that happen. But it starts with remembering what happened on October 7th, which he made clear that Hamas started a war, that Hamas now has a responsibility to get out of the picture so that those committed to peace can work with Israel to help achieve it.
Now, 2 Israeli lawmakers were removed from the chamber for disrupting President Trump's speech. They were holding signs that said genocide and recognize Palestine. How do you expect that issue of recognizing a Palestinian state to play into this peace summit and the negotiations going forward?
Well, I think it's clear that if there's going to be serious conversation about where the path to peace with the Palestinians lies, it starts with hopefully the brief conversation that you just showed between the president and Abu Mazen, and hopefully there will be some acknowledgement that there are significant governance reforms that the Palestinian Authority has to make to be able to do what's necessary to lead. That, again, Hamas can't have any role in Gaza. That the PA also needs to take steps to change the focus so that there is a clear push for peace, de-radicalization, stopping the funding of terrorists, those who perform terrorist acts against Israelis, making sure that the textbooks, that the efforts among the Palestinian youth is to focus on peace rather than on this idea that there should be only one state in the region. If there is a future at some point for two states, that future has to start with serious changes by the Palestinians and a recognition by everyone, as the president said clearly today in the Knesset, that Israel is not going anywhere, that the Jewish people's connection to this country, to this state, goes back 3,000 years, and the Palestinians and the Israelis have to be here together. But it starts with recognizing that Israel's not going anywhere. That's what Hamas learned. That's what Iran understands. That's what the parties in Sharm el-Sheikh understand. That's why they're now committed to moving forward to making peace and building Israel into the region in a more integrated way that will benefit everybody.
Ted, throughout this morning, we have talked about what this all means for Israel, what it means for Gaza, what it means for the Middle East in general. What do you think it means for Jewish Americans?
Well, today was a remarkable, just an incredible day. The first, all of the videos that we've all been hoping and praying to see of hostages being reunited with their families, the embrace that we've seen over and over has just been so moving. It's really incomprehensible to think of terrorists holding a family member hostage for over 2 years. So first, there was this overwhelming sense of relief that wasn't just felt in Israel, it was felt by the Jewish people around the world. It's something that we all feel a part of, that this is our family that's also coming home. And it provides this sense of relief of where we are now, and of real hope about what can come next in the region. When the world continues to call out the terrorist groups, isolate, defeat the terrorists, stand up to Iran in its support of terrorism, and stand as those countries in Sharm el-Sheikh are doing right now, stand up and say that their commitment is to peace in the region, the recognition of Israel, the full integration of Israel into the region. The president spoke very powerfully about what that could mean for not just the region, for the world. That has the Jewish community around the world, with its strong commitment to Israel, also appreciating the possibilities ahead.
All right, Ted Deutsch, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
And we will have much more on this breaking news of that peace summit you're looking at in Egypt. More on that right after this quick break. Stay with us.
Whenever, wherever news breaks, it's so important to always remember that lives are changed.
Here in London, in Buffalo,
Uvalde, Texas,
Edinburgh, Scotland.
From Poland once again tonight. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Ukrainian refugees here in Warsaw.
Do you think you'll ever be able to go back home?
We're heading to a small community outside of Mexico City.
Splintered houses and splintered lives.
The magnitude of the devastation.
You're streaming ABC News Live. Reporting from Rolling Fork, Mississippi.
Santa Fe, New Mexico. Raleigh, North Carolina. The U.S. Capitol.
Mayfield, Kentucky.
Minneapolis,
Mexico.
Tongass National Forest, Alaska.
getting you behind the stories as they happen, giving you a front row seat to our world as it plays out in real time, live.
ABC News Live Prime. We'll take you there.
Stream ABC News Live weeknights, America's most honored streaming news program, only on ABC News Live. Streaming free right now wherever you stream your news.
The ruby slippers are the most famous shoes in the world.
What would the shoes be worth today?
A lot. The shoes were stolen.
Stolen.
We worked together with the FBI.
Heaven only knows how many feet went into that pair of shoes.
There is more to this than anybody realizes.
Who knows where this is going to lead?
It's going to get real.
Okay, we want to know, who are the people in your state that make such a big difference?
Come on now. We all know someone who does so much.
And we want to celebrate them with you. So scan this QR code or go to goodmorningamerica.com. Tell us about them.
We're coming to all 50 states in 50 weeks to celebrate the best of what makes America beautiful.
ABC's David Muir, the most watched newscast in America. More Americans watch World News Tonight with David Muir than any other newscast.
Hi, I'm Diane Macedo. We have breaking news. President Trump is set to participate in a signing ceremony at a peace summit in Egypt at any moment. Just a little while ago, he greeted 34 world leaders who gathered to sign the historic agreement and talk about next steps for Gaza and the region. And there's the photo up they took just after all those individual greetings. This all comes after Hamas released the last living Israeli hostages. President Trump marked their arrival with a speech to the Israeli parliament, declaring the forces of chaos and terror had been, quote, totally defeated. Our chief international correspondent, James Longman, is actually there in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, with more on this peace summit now as those world leaders are gathering once again. James, Israel and Hamas have already signed an agreement. Neither is there today. So why do this?
Well, I think it's the optics, it's the choreography, it's getting everyone in one room. I mean, no one knows an image better than Donald Trump. We saw that in Alaska, and yet again we're seeing it here. Now, the flags in the back, we're suggesting that means that the most important people involved in the mediation are going to be present here. Of course, the United States and Egypt, but Turkey and Qatar too. I think it's important to say that actually there's not been any kind of major announcement by either the Israelis or Hamas that they have agreed to end the war. They haven't used that phrase yet. I might be mistaken, but I don't believe I am. Part of the reason why Donald Trump was repeating it in his speech at the Knesset, almost putting words in Benjamin Netanyahu's mouth to say, look, you've got to end this war. The Israelis have been trying to keep the door open a little bit to say, well, if something goes wrong, then we reserve the right to go back in. Similarly, Hamas saying, well, we agree with the broad principles of this effort, but not saying we officially disarm. So what we're watching now with Donald Trump there sat in the middle with President Sisi on one side of him, and I presume Erdogan will be seated on the other, and the Qataris up front too, will be a formalization of the end of the war in Gaza. But crucially, the Israelis and Hamas will not be here to sign it in person. So again, this is about optics rather than the main parties signing a piece of paper. But what happens on the ground is going to be more important than any piece of paper.
All right. And President Trump has now taken his seat. Karen, he really is just trying to get these world leaders on board for what is to come. Are there specific deliverables he's looking to walk away with today?
Yeah, I mean, the phase 2 that the president talked about in that peace plan is really all about the big stage that comes next in Gaza. And it's complicated. It's, about disarming Hamas. Sorry, Diane, I'll toss it back to you, Diane.
It sounds like President Trump might be speaking. Let's listen.
And it's just an honor being part of it. We're going to be signing a document that's going to spell out a lot of rules and regulations. Be a part of it. We're going to be signing a document that's going to spell out a lot of rules and regulations and lots of other things. And it's very comprehensive, but we've already signed documents in the Middle East and having to do with Israel and Hamas and just about everything else. And it's really working out incredibly well. The hostages, as you know, were let go on time, on schedule. The very sad situation of bodies, which was always a sad situation, and they're being sought out, and they're working with many different people, finding some were brought in and some were not. And they're working out to find out where those bodies are. It's hard to believe that you even have to say something like that. It's so sad. It's so sad. But what's not sad is that we have finally, after, I guess they say 3,000 years, I've heard from 3,000 years to 500 years, but whatever it is, it's a lot. But this was the granddaddy of them all. And frankly, I thought this was probably going to be the toughest, and maybe in many ways it was, but we had a lot of good talent. Steve Witkoff, Jared, and Marco, and Pete, and General Kane was so great. John Ratcliffe was incredible. We had an amazing array of talent, and we were helped by, in particular, the countries represented at this table.
I will say, Tamim, you were fantastic, and your country is unbelievable. And I don't think they give you a fair shake. They talk about you as though you're not a nice person, and you happen to be a nice person. You happen to live in a little tough neighborhood. You're surrounded by everybody. And without you, this wouldn't have happened. And I just want to thank you very much. That's Qatar. And thank you. He's a great gentleman, and he's an amazing leader. And another man who's been a friend of mine for a long time. I don't know what it is. I like the tough people better than I like the soft, easy ones. I don't know what the hell that is. It's a personality problem, I suspect. But this gentleman from a place called Turkey has one of the most powerful armies actually in the world. It's much more powerful than he even lets known. If you look at some of the recent conflicts, he was at the top of them, and he was winning them, and he did win them. And he doesn't want any credits. He doesn't want anything. He just wants to be left alone. He's a tough cookie, but he's been my friend. And every time I've ever needed him, he's been there for me. So I just want to thank President Erdogan, Turkey, great guy. When NATO has a problem with him, because he is difficult, they call me. They said, would you do me a favor? Could you speak to Erdogan? And I do, and he never fails us, right, General? He never fails. He's amazing. So I just want to thank you for the friendship. It's great. Thank you very much. And then, of course, we have the host tonight, and I just want to thank you very much. There was a reason we chose Egypt, because you were very helpful, and very, very helpful. Everybody wanted to have this, but we really thought it was appropriate. And you are a great leader. You have very little crime. You have problems that other countries don't have. And, of course, nothing's perfect, but the job you do is amazing, and I want to thank you. Another one, he's been my friend right from the beginning, during the campaign against crooked Hillary Clinton. Have you heard of her? We were both downstairs waiting to go up to meet this gentleman who has a place called Egypt, the oldest civilization. They say 6,000 years. China is 5,000 years, but you're actually number one, 6,000 years. Can you believe it? But the oldest, they say, civilization. But so I went up to meet him first. We liked each other so much that she waited for about an hour and a half. And I think your meeting lasted about 2 minutes with her. So I always remembered that. But that was our first meeting. We had great chemistry together. And he's a fantastic man and a fantastic general, by the way. But he's a great president, and I want to thank Egypt and all of your representatives for treating us all so well. Thank you very much. So we're going to be signing, and we're really representative of a whole group of nations, and they're sitting behind us, and you know most of them. I can tell you this guy's got so much money. They all have so much money. There's more money and power sitting behind us. I love that they're behind us. They've never been sitting behind anybody before. This is a unique position for them, but they are seriously, they're among the most powerful countries in the world, the richest countries in the world, and there's never been really an assemblage like what we have today. I don't think, Tamim, I've never seen it anyway. And I want to thank everybody for being with us. Here's a man, I just solved the war for him, Azerbaijan. Right. Did I do a good job? Where's your compatriot here? Where's Arias? You two guys are still getting along, right? They fought for 32 years. In about 1 hour, we settled it, right? And they like each other now, too. It's good. That's great. I think it's great. Well, I want to thank everybody for being here. We have Italy. She's a very strong ruler. She's doing a great job. You're doing a great job. Thank you very much. There's so many, but we're actually going to be making a speech after this. So this is just a very important signing, but we're doing a signing, then we're doing a speech, and then I may stay behind with the leaders just to talk about that, some things without the press, without the media. But I want to thank the media for you've been so respectful on this deal. You know the importance of the deal, and I really, it was so pleasant to watch. I was on the plane for quite a while listening to the various newscasts, and they were all fair. They were talking about how incredible this is. This is an incredible day for the world, let alone the Middle East. So I just wanted to thank the media. They really treated it with respect. I wish you could be like that on other things, but that's perhaps too much to ask for. But on this, tremendous, everybody feels the same, just tremendous respect, and we appreciate it very much. Can we get the documents, please? Okay.
Okay. You will sign right here, Mr. President. Right here.
This is an ABC News special report. Now reporting, David Muir.
Good afternoon from Tel Aviv. We are coming back on the air for what has been a history-making series of events in the Middle East. At this hour, President Trump joining world leaders for a ceasefire signing ceremony in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, signaling the end of Israel's war with Hamas. The ceremony and summit formalizing the Gaza cease and peace plan. It also symbolizes the international community's commitment to end the fighting and surge humanitarian aid into Gaza and begin recovery and reconstruction efforts there. President Trump is expected to deliver remarks after this signing, but you can see he's gathered there with leaders in Sharm el-Sheikh, each one of them signing there. He's expected to give a speech in a moment.
To this point, can you believe it? And it's going to hold up, too. It's going to hold up.
There you hear the president talking about the conflict, the deep history of conflict in this region, and his sincere hope that what they signed today and what we've witnessed today holds here in the region. Of course, the world witnessing the emotional release of the last 20 surviving hostages held in Gaza, their 2-year ordeal coming to an end today. Scenes playing out of now former hostages reuniting with their families. Extraordinary images coming in from Israel today. These reunions began this morning with the first sign that these hostages, the 20 remaining living hostages, were in fact en route being returned to Israel. Several hospitals were ready for these hostages to be checked on, their families waiting to reunite with them. The first 7 came in, then came news that 13 more were on their way home to Israel. 20 living hostages now returned. Just a short time ago, President Trump also addressing Israel's parliament, where he declared the golden age of the Middle East. The president receiving multiple standing ovations at the Knesset, urging Israel and Palestinians to embrace peace, saying the long and painful nightmare is finally over, in his words. Before his address, President Trump meeting with families of the hostages, the president and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu listening, of course, to their stories. These incredible 2 years, the agonizing wait for those families. On the other side of this ceasefire, Israel releasing 1,900 Palestinian prisoners, including 250 who'd been serving life sentences. The others, of course, detained during the war, huge crowds turning out as they arrived on buses, many in the West Bank. And of course, we should also point out this is a very somber day for so many families, because Hamas is also beginning to turn over some of the remaining 28 hostages who died while in captivity. It's our belief at this hour, it's been reported that only a few have been returned. Their remains will be identified first before they are returned to the families, but that is going to be a very slow and continue to be a painful process for the families here.
We'll give you a little speech, and then we're going to meet with the leaders after that and spend a little time together without the media. The media is invited to the speech.
You can hear President Trump here saying he will be giving a speech momentarily, talking about the leaders who gathered in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, from throughout the Middle East here, signaling their support for this deal. And let's get right to Chief White House Correspondent Mary Bruce, also right here in Tel Aviv. And as you could hear from President Trump here today, hoping that this day not only defines his presidency, but defines the future here of the Middle East. What comes next, though, Mary, as you and I both know, will be a significant challenge here.
A tremendous challenge, David. And President Trump throughout the day has been welcomed both here in Israel and in Egypt as a peacemaker. And this is a huge success for President Trump. He is now hailing this as a historic dawn of a new Middle East. He, no question, helped to broker this deal. He was pivotal through his relationships within the Middle East and also just through his own brash style, putting tremendous pressure on Netanyahu and also taking actions that proved that he could be trusted. to Hamas. But the president today has been touting this deal. He has also been looking ahead. But it is notable that he has not really been discussing the details yet of the many, many challenges ahead. He did tell reporters a short while ago that he believes that phase 2 has begun, that it began immediately. So we are now at that point. But the president has also declared that this war is over. It is now up to many of the leaders that he is meeting with now to ensure that that actually comes to pass. But there are tremendous questions that still remain here. How will Gaza be made secure? How will it be reconstructed? Who's going to pay for all of that? And who will govern Gaza in the short term? I have been asking these questions of the president for the last week. What does phase 2 look like? He hasn't wanted to get into those details just yet. Today has been a moment for him to celebrate this victory. The question now, how does he take this momentum and move it forward? And we have heard from him that he, in fact, believes that this is a turning point, not just for Israel and the people of Gaza, but for the Middle East as a whole. He has mentioned relations with Iran today in his remarks as well. He has a grand, big vision, and he is hoping that this is just the beginning of a true new era here, David.
And no one, of course, minimizing the power, the impact of these 20 hostages being returned to these Israeli families here today. Extremely moving images being seen all over the world, Mary. But on Air Force One coming into the region, as you know, President Trump made it very clear when asked. He said the war is over. We have not heard those words from Israeli authorities, any sort of declaration to that extent from the prime minister or the Israeli military.
We have not, and it is a very important distinction. The president has been blunt. He thinks this is going to hold and that the war is over. In fact, he was quite blunt about that. The war is over. The war is over. You understand that, is what he said to reporters when they pointed out that Netanyahu hasn't gone so far in declaring that. Hamas has welcomed that statement. And so there appears to be a bit of a disagreement. And certainly while the president is using this breakthrough, this return of hostages, this tremendous ceasefire to claim that the entire war has been solved, the reality is that there is a lot left to work out here. And while interestingly, Netanyahu, of course, is not there tonight. He was invited by Egyptian President el-Sisi in a conversation that President Trump brokered himself earlier today. Netanyahu not attending, citing the Jewish holiday. So it is an interesting moment to have this conversation about the path forward without essentially the protagonists in this story, David.
Yeah, we had some reporting, in fact, thank you, Mary, some reporting that inside the beast, that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rode with President Trump after he arrived here in Israel to the Knesset, to the parliament, where President Trump spoke, that it was during that drive that the president urged the head of Egypt, if you will, the leader of Egypt, President el-Sisi, as Mary just mentioned, to call and invite the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, which he then did. He at first said thank you for the invitation, accepting the invitation, but as Mary points out, declined making the trip because of the Jewish holiday. But there they are in the beast as they travel to the parliament here in Israel earlier today. I want to bring in our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell. Ian, you and I have both spent a lot of time in Hostage Square here in Tel Aviv. The crowd swelling yet again today. And of course, this was the pivotal day. For more than 2 years, you walk into that square, you see the yellow ribbons, you see the faces of the hostages, and you see that giant screen that had the clock, essentially showing how many days, how many hours, how many minutes that these families waited for the return of their loved ones.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an incredibly emotional day. I mean, to cap a very emotional 2 years. I mean, you know, when you talk to hostage families, they talk about being on this emotional roller coaster. Points at which their hopes are raised and then dashed again. Points at which they think their loved ones are going to be returned, only for that not to happen. And so certainly for the families of those 20 hostages, not just for those families and supporters, but for so many Israelis, this was an absolutely key day. Partly closure. I mean, of course, there are problems ahead. There are things that are unresolved, not least the bodies of the deceased hostages, which you mentioned earlier. That has to be resolved. But this was like the first day being here where there was an air a lightness in the air, where people were smiling. People dared believe that this actually was the end of the war. And we saw wave after wave of applause, of crying, of hugging, of singing. When President Trump spoke to the Knesset, it was broadcast live here. People were chanting the president's name, Steve Witkoff's name, Jared Kushner's name, even Marco Rubio's name, just to show how important the president has been, but also the warmth that is felt by so many Israelis towards President Trump. And you've seen those kind of banners yourself. But there are still outlying issues, as you've said. In terms of phase 2, the demilitarization of Gaza, Hamas handing over its weapons, demobilizing. The reality on the ground at the moment is it is Hamas that is back in charge there. The reconstruction, clearly enormous. But I think there's still a bigger question about resolving the Palestinian issue, and that has not been addressed as of yet.
Our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, right there in Hostage Square. Ian describing, thank you, Ian, the lightness in the air that he hasn't seen for quite some time there in the square. And I can second that for sure. We were there in the last 24 hours and you could walk through. There were so many people there on the eve of what was set to be this historic release of hostages. You could hear them singing Hallelujah. It was very quiet in that crowd. There was movement, there was support, but there was certainly a cautious optimism given just the length of the wait, more than 2 years for their loved ones to come home. Nobody wanted to get in the way of what could be a history-making moment. And then this morning, shortly after sunrise here in Israel, about 8 a.m., we began to see the earliest movements that this, in fact, was underway. I want to bring in our chief international correspondent, James Longman, who is in Egypt at this hour, where members of the Arab world and beyond have joined President Trump in a show of support for this peace plan. And, of course, phase 1 underway. President Trump at one point, James, saying phase 2 has begun. These phases, he said, are interconnected. But as you've heard Ian and our team, Mary, Martha Raddatz earlier in the day outline, there are significant challenges ahead with this 20-point plan.
Yeah, absolutely, David. I mean, these are the big unanswered questions. I think today what I've been mostly struck by is Donald Trump's sheer force of personality. There are not many men, not many leaders who can walk into the Knesset in Israel to such rapturous applause, such a warm welcome, to clearly know so many members of the Israeli leadership so personally. He's been in the weeds on this, and then less than an hour later, appear in a room of world leaders, Arab and Muslim leaders, and have the same kind of warm welcome. It really is his force of nature which has managed to make this happen. I mean, I was struck that he was standing on that stage here in Sharm el-Sheikh, welcoming world leader after world leader, many of whom he's had his disagreements with, as we know. And it wasn't President Sisi of Egypt doing that. It was him. He is front and center here. His force of will, he has said what he wants to happen. He's laid out this 20-point plan. The objectives are very clear. And of course, the big question is how we get there. And I've been looking at these pictures as we're looking, the optics, Peace 2025. And I'm reminded of another summit, David, the Alaska summit with Vladimir Putin, which we're still waiting to see whether or not there are results from that. That was perhaps at this stage, we think, more optics than substance. Could this be different? Will this be different? Well, one way it might be is there are so many more partners, so many more vital actors in the room. The mediators, the Turks, the Qataris are with Donald Trump sitting at that table signing this agreement. And that is why there's optimism here. But yes, it is the detail, and it's the detail that could derail the very, very fragile peace that we're now seeing in Gaza. I mean, one big issue which has already raised its head in the last few hours is the issue of the remains of hostages who have been killed whilst in captivity. It is unclear if all of those remains are going to be out. And as we've heard from the hostage families time and time again, they will not rest until all of the hostages are out alive or dead. And so the Israeli defense minister has already been speaking about how they want Hamas to keep up their side of the deal. We're also hearing that Hamas pushing to mobilize its force. Donald Trump actually was asked about that. He's said that he believes that Hamas will be a kind of police force in the interim period. But is that something that the Israelis have absolutely agreed to? There is so much about this that we do not know. What we do know is that Hamas needs to demilitarize in order for Israel to believe that this war is over. And that is very, very unclear at this stage. It's also unclear who is going to foot the bill for rebuilding Gaza, who is going to govern Gaza. Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian president of the Palestinian Authority, is on that stage, has been on that stage with President Trump today. I think the president was hoping that Mahmoud Abbas and Netanyahu would be with him together for that photo op. Nevertheless, Abbas will be key here, but he does not have legitimacy among large swathes of the Palestinian population. And what agency will the Palestinians have over their own future? Is this all just going to be decided by international committee? What about them, their voice? Where is that in all this? That is what the Arab world will be thinking as they watch these events unfold today. David?
No question about that. Stick with us here, James, as we await President Trump to speak in Egypt just moments from now. And of course, we're going to carry that live. And James, let's drill down on just a couple of those key points, because as part of this first phase of the deal, it was not only the return of the 20 hostages, but also the return of the remains of the hostages who did not survive while in captivity. It's believed the bodies of 28 hostages remain. And of course, President Trump himself acknowledged that would be a difficult task ahead, that the bodies were being unearthed. There is reporting today that up to 4 have been returned, and they must be identified first before those families will even learn if it is in fact their loved ones. But we've heard from the hostage families today. We've heard from the Israeli military saying already that they believe Hamas is not keeping up its part of the deal here, given the fact that so many families are still waiting for the remains of their loved ones.
Some of these hostages are in different locations. That is part of the reason why it might be difficult logistically for Hamas to get these remains back. Are they playing games, or is it just that they don't know, after the chaos of more than 2 years of war, how to get these remains back to Israel? And this is where the extremes on both sides might be able to take advantage of the uncertainty here. You may have groups inside Gaza who don't want this war to end, who start firing rockets into Israel. You may have a terror attack on the streets of Israel again by groups who do not want to see peace. You may see the extreme religious groups in Israel push for a return to war inside Gaza. We've already heard what they have to say about the future of a Palestinian state. They absolutely don't want that to happen, and they're pushing ahead with settlements. Where is the conversation over the occupation? Will that be part of the conversations that Donald Trump is willing to have with the Israelis, as well as with his partners here in the Middle East at this extraordinary summit today? So there are a lot of unanswered questions further down the line, but peace comes step by step. Today was step 1. What we're watching now, hopefully step 2, but there are many, many, many more. And the key here in any peace deal is to not allow the objective to be derailed by those long-term objectives. The key is to get one thing at a time. And Donald Trump seems to have understood that, and it's a force of his personality that has got all these very, very important players around the table to try to make sure that that's a reality. But a lot of these people, a lot of these world leaders are going to have to start making promises from today. Key among those promises, money. They're going to have to start writing checks. We understand. J.D. Vance, the vice president, saying that he believes that it's the Gulf countries who are going to step up. We know, again, Donald Trump, very good relationship with Gulf countries as well as with Israel. So what role will they play in the rebuilding of Gaza? And this international stabilization force, what will that look like? A big criticism of the Middle East and the Arab and Muslim world, particularly over decades, has been, well, where have they been on the Palestinian issue? What support are they willing to give the Palestinian people? And so, again, Donald Trump and his force of personality has got these leaders around the table to commit to some kind of international stabilization force. But we don't know what that looks like. We don't know if the Israelis are going to allow that to be deployed inside Gaza. They've already balked at international oversight. We know the relationship with the United Nations, between Israel and the United Nations, is at its worst that it's possibly ever been. But again, Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General, he is one of the leaders in the room today of the United Nations. So we shall see what happens. There is a lot of optimism. These world leaders clearly want to be here because it's good optics for them. But the detail, that's yet to be understood, David.
Many details left to be understood. James Longman, our chief international correspondent in Egypt for this. James, stay with us here as we continue our live coverage. We await President Trump, who will address not only the leaders in that room, but the world. And we'll be listening to his comments live here on ABC. I want to bring back in Mary Bruce, our chief White House correspondent. And Mary, you heard James talking about the very difficult questions that lie ahead. Obviously, getting the 20 hostages home, that's phase one, and it is significant. Just getting to this point, a lot of credit being given to President Trump, not only around the world, but particularly here in Israel. Mary, you've seen it yourself. I saw it right here in the square, Hostage Square, where people came up and told me that they appreciated the efforts of President Trump, and in many ways they believe it was President Trump who applied significant pressure on their own Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. We know the two men are allies, but that there was behind the scenes significant pressure in the final days leading up to that ceasefire. President Trump actually alluding to that during his address to the Knesset, the parliament here in Israel today, saying Benjamin Netanyahu can be tough to deal with. Got some laughter in Parliament, said that's why he's a good leader, but he can be difficult to deal with. And Mary, I thought that was a bit of a hint to what those final days of negotiations might have been like between President Trump and his close ally, Benjamin Netanyahu. But as James talked about, the significant questions going forward, we know there's a board of peace, if you will. They've named this apolitical group that will oversee the future of Gaza. And chairing that group will be President Trump himself. He talked about that today in Parliament. But that's taking on a significant role on the world stage. He's standing there, and as James mentioned, it wasn't President el-Sisi shaking hands there in Egypt with the leaders who are gathered in Sharm el-Sheikh. It was President Trump himself taking on one of the most difficult, one of the thorniest, one of the most intractable sort of regions in the world when you look at the history of the fighting here. And now he'll be sort of chairing that board as it moves forward.
Yeah, and there is no question President Trump is taking ownership in many ways of this. It was remarkable to see him standing there greeting all of the leaders, shaking everyone's hands one by one. And as you noted, he will be the chair of this board of peace. In fact, the president was joking earlier when he was speaking with reporters that everyone's lining up to be a member of that board. But it does put President Trump front and center in the conversation about what comes next. And that means that he will continue to face tough questions and in many ways be held accountable in part for what comes next year. You noted that he said that Netanyahu can be tough. Well, so can President Trump. And he has said that that is what helped to clinch this deal, was that Trump was willing to be tough on Netanyahu. He put tremendous pressure on him, especially in the last few weeks, to make it clear that now was the time, that they had to have this ceasefire, that Israel had to be willing to pull back its troops to those agreed upon borders so that they could finally get the hostages released and move on to this next phase. But also, as we were discussing, Netanyahu and President Trump don't exactly see eye to eye on where things currently stand. The president has been emphatic that the war is over. He has said that several times today. Netanyahu hasn't been willing to go that far. And that means that President Trump may have to continue to be tough with Netanyahu moving forward. All of these leaders here now to discuss the future of the fate of this conflict and the future of peace in the Middle East. And so much of this will come down to these really, detailed, thorny issues. Who is going to pay? Who's going to put up forces to help to bring about security within Gaza, just so that you can get to the point of being able to rebuild? What happens to the people of Gaza who, have said it has been written in this 20-point peace plan? And this was a bit of a shift for the president, because you recall months ago, in fact, I recall that first meeting with Netanyahu in the Oval Office, where President Trump stunned many by saying the Gazans Palestinians would have to leave Gaza. Now in this 20-point peace plan, quite the opposite tone. It says that they're being encouraged to stay. And I pushed the president on this point late last week, just asking him to clarify. Can he guarantee that no one will be forced to leave? And he said yes. Yes, Palestinians will be able to stay in Gaza. But of course, he has also noted that it is very difficult, given the conditions there, to imagine how they will be able to live through this rebuilding process. So there are just a lot of basic nuts and bolts logistical questions about how you are going to get to a point of peace. And today now marks the beginning of that conversation with these leaders. But even once they agree on something, you of course have to get the main players on board as well, David.
Mary Bruce, our chief White House correspondent, also here in Tel Aviv covering this historic day, the return of the remaining 20 living hostages from Hamas captivity back home to Israel. We've seen the emotional reunions with their family members already. There are several who are undergoing medical evaluation at the hospital, but it's believed that all are okay. They were all able to walk on their own, mothers hugging their sons who they haven't seen in more than 2 years. Ian Pannell looking at these pictures right along with me here. And of course, Ian, in Gaza, the return of many who were released by the Israelis. And when you look at the aerials of the damage after 2 years of conflict, and when you think about the civilians who were caught in the middle of this war, tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians who were killed during this conflict, the process there to rebuild, to secure the area, to get food and supplies in far greater numbers, given the hunger that we've seen so many children and families face there, many of them making that trek back to their home to see what remains. And you've seen the images, you've seen it yourself up close, Ian, that many of them are returning to homes that simply don't exist anymore.
Yeah, I mean, in your report on Good Morning America, you had this one Palestinian who made that very point. It's not just that there's damage, it's everything has gone. There was one woman that our team on the ground spoke to. She couldn't even find where her home had been. Such was the scale of destruction in the neighborhood. It wasn't just the homes that had gone, but the streets had gone, the neighborhood had gone. There's no running water, there's no food, there's no electricity, there's no internet in those northern areas. Over 80% of the buildings inside Gaza have been destroyed or badly damaged. We went in ourselves with the IDF just a week or so ago. This was in the south of Gaza. There wasn't one building that hadn't been either destroyed or severely damaged. There was nothing salvageable from that. And I think for Palestinians, of course, there's relief that the bombing has finally stopped. All those fears every day, every night, our team on the ground have talked about this. That has gone. But it's the shock of everything they've been through, the level of death, the level of destruction.
Ian Pannell, our chief foreign correspondent, we can see President Trump there in Sharm el-Sheikh. He's been introduced by President el-Sisi of Egypt, who remains at the microphone. Applause in that room for President Trump. And Mary, as we await just a few seconds left before the president speaks, and we'll take it live, of course, right here on ABC. This is a moment when the leaders of the Arab world are there for President Trump to show their support. And the question now will be, what will they do to contribute to making sure there is a secure Gaza and a Gaza where the tens of thousands of civilians will be fed, will be policed, will be protected, and have their own sovereignty.
David, the president is looking for their buy-in, and then he has to make sure that they keep their word. Those are two very daunting tasks. And so I think in this speech, the president is likely to tout this amazing accomplishment, to praise everyone in the room for coming together to help make this happen, and then urge them to keep this momentum going. We do have a few excerpts of the speech, and he will say all the momentum now is toward a great, glorious and lasting peace. But he needs the help of all of these leaders to make sure that that actually comes to fruition. And that is a very tall task, David.
Mary, we heard the president just moments ago talking about the media, which we know he often does. He is a student of the media, watches the reporting very closely, seems somewhat surprised himself at the coverage of this historic moment. The return of the 20 hostages, said the media by and large covered it with, he appreciated the favorable coverage. And of course, the tougher questions come after the return of these hostages. And as I was saying earlier, there is no one witnessing what we've seen today diminishing the power of what finally played out for the families who waited for more than 2 years. But President Trump likely knows himself what comes next will be equally as difficult here.
He does. He is well aware of that. He certainly is taking a victory lap today. He certainly has been relishing all of the praise, but the praise is much deserved. He played a very pivotal role here, an incredibly pivotal role in getting this deal across the finish line in a way that, as he notes, his predecessor was unable to do. But all of the circumstances coming together, the work of his negotiators, Steve Witkoff, his Middle East envoy, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, using his real estate know-how, his connections in the region to get this deal together. But even Jared Kushner has reflected on how this is similar to a real estate deal in the sense that you get to yes and then you work out the details. They have gotten to yes. They have gotten the ceasefire. They have now the hostages finally home on this momentous day. Now you have to get down to doing the real work of working through what comes next and how you make sure that this lasts and coming up with some long-term solution. So the president, yes, he has been, I think, quite pleased to see all of the coverage praising his role in this. He certainly seemed to relish the reception he received here in Israel earlier today, the lengthy standing ovations, the repeated standing ovation, the heaping praise from the Israeli leaders, the calls for him to perhaps receive the Nobel Peace Prize next year. So, yes, this is a huge moment for this president, for the U.S., but now what comes next, David?
You mentioned, Mary, Steve Witkoff, the envoy, President Trump's envoy, and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Neither describe themselves necessarily as diplomats, though they will be defined that way given the history-making roles they had leading up to this moment. And both Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner have indicated that they're in this through the rest of these phases, that this wasn't an effort on their part to get us to the hostages coming home and then they would walk away from this. The two of them are signaling already that they will continue the very difficult work that comes now.
Yeah, and that was a real question. How much involvement would they have? What would that look like? Steve Witkoff telling reporters a short while ago that he's already begun working on implementation. He's focused on that next phase. How involved Jared Kushner will be may still be a bit of an X factor, but it is a remarkable story for the history books how these two real estate developers, not career diplomats, somehow managed to negotiate this deal. They have spent the last several days actually in Egypt hammering this out. Jared Kushner has been blunt in saying it was not easy. He said there were moments where it was really chaotic. He's joked that Steve Witkoff used a lot of four-letter words, but that they were able to get this over the finish line. And a lot of it comes down to the way they do business. Jared Kushner, of course, has deep ties to the region. He knows many of these leaders, both through his own personal business, but also, of course, through his work during his father-in-law's first term. He helped to negotiate the Abraham Accords with much success, something that the president mentioned he hopes to continue to build upon earlier in his remarks today. So it is truly a very classic Trump tale. He doesn't necessarily turn to those with career diplomats, those with this kind of experience. He thinks outside the box. He touts himself and takes pride in the fact that he does that. It is why President Trump often refers to himself as the deal maker in chief, and that is a moniker that he certainly has earned here in getting to this first phase, David.
In addition to the significant praise for President Trump here on the ground, Mary, thank you. Stick with us here. And for Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner in the hostage square when they appeared here over the weekend, to huge cheers. And in fact, when they tried to share some of the credit with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, there were boos, audible boos you could hear in Hostage Square here. They wanted to make sure that the credit, the people who had gathered here in the square at least, was felt by the Americans who applied pressure on their prime minister. Just a few more moments I'm expecting here from President El-Sisi before we hear from President Trump. But Ian Pannell, who's also with us here, our chief foreign correspondent. And Ian, when you look at these images today of the hostages reuniting with their families, in so many cases, sons hugging their mothers again, it's hard to overstate the role many of those moms themselves played in applying pressure, never giving up, 2 years straight, day after day. You're looking at the images right now up on the screen, the role that these mothers, these parents, these families played in trying to apply pressure on their government and on world leaders to bring these hostages home.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there. And I hadn't really thought about it that way, but it is the mother.
Let's listen to...
Well, thank you very much, and that was a great honor. I appreciate it very much, Mr. President, Mr. General, Mr. President. Great General, great President. Thank you very much. This is the day that people across the region and around the world have been working, striving, hoping, and praying for. They have done things over the last month that I think were really unthinkable. Nobody thought this could happen. With the historic agreement we've just signed, those prayers of millions have finally been answered. As you know, the hostages have been returned, and further work goes on having to do with the, sadly to say, bodies. Together we've achieved what everybody said was impossible. At long last, we have peace in the Middle East, and it's a very simple expression, peace in the Middle East, and we've heard it for many years, but nobody thought it could ever get there, and now we're there. I want to congratulate everybody sitting in these first few rows and standing behind me. I don't know why they chose to stand, but I promise I'll make it short, okay? We are not going to keep you standing for long. These are great leaders. After years of suffering and bloodshed, the war in Gaza is over. Humanitarian aid is now pouring in, including hundreds of truckloads of food and medical equipment and other supplies, much of it paid for by people in this room. Civilians are returning to their homes. The hostages are reuniting. I mean, it's beautiful. I'm just watching it backstage. The level of love and sorrow, I've never seen anything like it. It's amazing when you see they haven't seen their mother, their father. They haven't seen them in such a long time, and they lived in a tunnel, a very little tunnel, very deep. And the level of love is just incredible. It's a beautiful thing to see. It's, in one sense, it's so horrible that it could have taken place, but in another sense, it's so beautiful to see. A new and beautiful day is rising, and now the rebuilding begins. The rebuilding is maybe going to be the easiest part. I think we've done a lot of the hardest part, because the rest comes together. We all know how to rebuild, and we know how to build better than anybody in the world. I want to express my tremendous gratitude to the Arab and Muslim nations who helped make this incredible breakthrough possible. And you really did. To President El-Sisi of Egypt, who is so generously hosting us today. And I want to thank you for the outstanding job your country is doing in so many different ways, and for helping us so much with this peace agreement. I also want to thank the president for the escort of 6 fighter jets. So we looked out the window, we said, I hope they're friendly, and they turned out to be very friendly. But we had 3 on each side, and they are beauties right out of the great, really American manufacturing hub. We make the greatest military equipment in the world. We have the strongest military in the world by far. And I knew exactly what those planes were, and I knew exactly how much you paid for those planes, too. You paid a lot, but you got a pretty good deal. And they are great planes, and we just appreciate it. That was quite an escort in. That was very impressive. But Air Force One was really, it was covered with Egyptian desert just a few months ago. If you think about it, just a few months ago it was Egyptian desert, and now it was just a few feet off our window. And it was a spectacular sight, and I appreciate it very much. Really, that was pretty good. You got our people by surprise. I don't know if they were thrilled right at the beginning, but they were thrilled as we sailed along very, very calmly and safely. And I'm deeply honored to receive from you, Egypt's highest state honor, the Order of the Nile. The Nile is so beautiful, so magnificent. It's such a beautiful title, the Order of the Nile. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Appreciate it. Great honor. I also want to give a very special thanks to the Emir of Qatar, a man who's outstanding. He's been a friend of mine for a long time, long before politics, and he's a fantastically respected man. His Highness Sheikh Tamim is respected by everybody. He's respected by everybody, and in the most positive way, not only because of power, because of his heart. He's got a tremendous heart, and he's a great leader, and his country loves him. Thank you very much for being here. It's an honor. Let me also express our condolences to the Qataris on the tragic car crash that claimed the lives of your cherished diplomats, some of whom were known by our people, and they were supposed to be incredible people. So please extend our sorrow and best wishes. That was tough. That was really tough. On this extraordinary occasion, I also want to give our sincere thanks to President Erdogan of Turkey. He's always there when I need him. He's such a tough guy. He is tough as you can be, but we love him. And when they have a problem with you, they always call me to handle it. And usually I come through. We just have a good relationship, and we have from the beginning. And so I want to thank you very much and say hello to your wife, your beautiful wife. And it's great to be with you. Always there. When I need him, he's always there. Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I also want to thank, I just spoke to him on the phone, His Royal Highness Crown Prince Mohammed, Saudi Arabia, a special friend of mine. Boy, he's come so long and so far, and he's doing a fantastic job for his country. And I want to just thank him. And His Highness Sheikh Mohammed of the United Arab Emirates is here. Where? He's here someplace. Well, he's not here, but he's here in spirit, I can tell you that. And he's been another one. He's been absolutely incredible, and we appreciate it very much. And His Majesty King Abdullah of Jordan, and thank you very much, King Abdul of Jordan. He's here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And you really have been a great helper. We appreciate it. Appreciate it. Prime Minister Sharif of Pakistan, and also I have to say my favorite Field Marshal from Pakistan, who's not here, but the Prime Minister is here, and you're going to give his regards. Where are you? There you go. Thank you very much. Do you want to say what you said to me the other day? Come, would you like to say what you said the other day? I think it was so nice. Please.
Thank you very much, my dear President Trump, my dear brother President Fatil Sisi of Egypt, Majesties, Highnesses, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, and a very good evening. Well, I would say today is one of the greatest days in contemporary history, because peace has been achieved after untiring efforts led by President Trump, who is genuinely a man of peace, who has relentlessly and untiringly worked throughout these months, day in and day out, to make this world a place to live with peace and prosperity. I would say that Pakistan had nominated President Donald Trump for Nobel Peace Prize for his outstanding, extraordinary contributions to first stop war between India and Pakistan, and then achieve ceasefire along with his very wonderful team. And today, again, I would like to nominate this great president for Nobel Peace Prize, because I genuinely feel that he is the most genuine and most wonderful candidate for Peace Prize, because he has brought not only peace in South Asia, saved millions of people, their lives. And today, here in Sharm el-Sheikh, achieving peace in Gaza is saving millions of lives in the Middle East. Mr. President, I would like to salute you for your exemplary leadership, visionary leadership. And I think that you are the man this world needed most at this point in time. World would always remember you as a man who did everything, went out of the way to stop 7 and today 8 wars. I would like to thank my very dear brother, Sheikh Tamim. He's Akh al-Shaqiq, who has really worked very hard along with others to achieve peace in this region. My very dear brother, President Tayyip Erdogan, His Majesty, King Abdullah, and of course, my very dear brother, Mohammed bin Zayed of UAE, and of course, my very dear brother, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And he has also been very, very helpful and contributed very valuably in this wonderful peace process. Ladies and gentlemen, I wouldn't want to take more of your time. Suffice it to say, had it not been for this gentleman, not only, who knows, India and Pakistan are both nuclear powers. Had he not intervened along with his wonderful team, during those 4 days, the war could have escalated to a level. Who would have lived to tell what happened? And similarly, here in this part of the world, in the Middle East, Mr. President, your valuable contribution along with President Sisi, I think history will remember in golden words. I wouldn't say more, except God bless you, God give you long life to serve like this for all time to come. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Thank you very much. Wow. Thank you very much.
Very kind.
Thank you. Wow, I didn't expect that. Let's go home. There's nothing more I have to say. Goodbye, everybody. That was really beautiful and beautifully delivered. Wow. Thank you very much. Also with us is President Prabowo, a very incredible man of Indonesia. President, come in. Great job. President Abbas of the Palestinian Authority. See, we have them all. We have them all. Good, great. It's good to have you. And so many others. I have a list here. This first 3 rows and what's standing behind me, I don't know why they chose to stand, but that's there. They're going to be very famous tomorrow, all of them. We have the Arab League is represented by His Excellency, and thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much. We have Armenia, and Azerbaijan. That's a little war that we stopped. That's a little war. There they are. Look at them. They're sitting. When I met with them, it was in the Oval Office. They fought for like 31 years or some crazy number. And they had one sitting on that side of the Oval Office, one sitting. By the time we finished in 1 hour, they were both hugging each other. And now they're friends and they're getting along great. Look at it. So I want to thank you both. That's incredible. Really incredible. So you have Armenia and you have Bahrain, you have Canada. It's so great to have, in fact, the president called and he wanted to know if it's worthwhile. He knew exactly what it was. He knew the importance. Where's Canada, by the way? Where are you? Where are you? He knew the importance of this. He said, I want to be there. So many people have done that. They called. I mean, they heard about it. And these are not people that can do that very easily. They have pretty big schedules, to put it mildly. The most powerful people. And I appreciate you being here very much, Mr. President. Fantastic. Fantastic. And Cyprus, Egypt, the European Union, it's a lot of countries. France, thank you very much, Emmanuel. I would imagine Emmanuel standing someplace behind me. Where is he? Yeah. I can't believe it. You're taking a low-key approach today. He's my friend. That's great. Good job. Thank you very much, Emmanuel. In Germany, the new Chancellor of Germany he's easy to spot because he's very tall.
and he's very smart, and he's doing a fantastic job for his country. Appreciate it very much, and congratulations, a big election. That was a big one. That was going to change things. Greece, we have Greece. We have Hungary. Oh, Victor, where is Victor? Victor. We love Victor. Victor, I call him. You know, I put the little accent on it. You are fantastic, all right? I know a lot of people don't agree with me, but I'm the only one that matters. You are fantastic. He's a great leader. I endorsed him the last election he had, and he won by 28 points. So you're going to do even better this time. You have another election, and you're going to do great, and we appreciate it, and we're behind you 100%. That's Hungary. India is a great country with a very good friend of mine at the top, and he's just done a fantastic job. And I think that Pakistan and India are going to live very nicely together, right? That's not a very, they are. And they're two great, I tell you, leaders, great leaders as far as I'm concerned. Indonesia, we covered, and I just want to say that that's a big country, a powerful country. It does unbelievably well, and it's great to have you. Iraq, we have Iraq with lots of oil. They have so much oil, they don't know what to do with it. That's a big problem when you have so much. As you can hear
President Trump in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, thanking the list of countries, the leaders who've gathered from across the Arab world and beyond. You can see Britain's Prime Minister standing behind the President there as well, Italy's Prime Minister as well. Leaders from all over the world signaling that they support President Trump's effort to try to continue with his 20-point plan here beyond what we witnessed today. The return of 20 remaining hostages still alive who've been held by Hamas in Gaza. Though the president knows himself, much of the hard work now comes after today. I want to go back to Ian Pannell just for a quick moment, Ian, because the images seen around the world today, those reunions, and I was asking you about the parents, the moms who never gave up, the families who kept the pressure on. They deserve enormous credit today as well.
Johnny, we're going to the World Cup.
Yeah, absolutely, David. And we've seen them here in Hostage Square. They've led protests outside of the Israeli parliament. They've traveled to the White House to meet President Trump. They've been to Congress. And they have had to endure the most unbelievable pain and hardship. There was one mother who just before the reunion said, I can finally be a mum again when I can hug my son. And it's that kind of power. They came together, the whole hostage and family movement, and they're still here tonight, still active, still lobbying for the remains of the deceased hostages to be returned. They're upset that only 4 of the bodies will have been released by the end of today, accusing Hamas of reneging on the deal. But they've been absolutely pivotal to this entire movement, keeping the attention of the world on the plight of the hostages. Again, taking the politics out of it, portraying the human side of the suffering that they've had to endure and their loved ones inside.
Our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, and our team throughout the region, I thank you all. And I thank you at home for watching as well. Our coverage continues on ABC News Live, abcnews.com. And of course, I'll be back with the entire team for World News Tonight. I'm David Muir in Tel Aviv. Until then, good day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
David, thank you. Today, the skies are calm, the guns are silent, the sirens are still. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. Those words from President Trump as history is written in the Middle East. President Trump surrounded by leaders from more than 20 countries addressing the world from Egypt after both sides signed the first phase of the peace agreement. Trump calling this moment a historic dawn for the region, saying his administration was able to achieve what everyone thought was impossible. Take a listen.
Those prayers of millions have finally been answered. As you know, the hostages have been returned, and further work goes on having to do with the, sadly to say, bodies. Together we've achieved what everybody said was impossible. Now the rebuilding begins. The rebuilding is maybe going to be the easiest part. I think we've done a lot of the hardest part because the rest comes together.
Families in Israel now celebrating as the last 20 living hostages are back home after 738 days in captivity. Those emotional and long-awaited reunions taking place in the early morning hours after Hamas handed over the remaining individuals to the Red Cross and into Israeli custody.
Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. עצם
That joy clearly radiating across Israel and transcending the border, where families in Gaza are also celebrating the ceasefire. Nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners will be released in this first phase of the deal. Busloads of prisoners already brought to Gaza, creating gut-wrenching scenes like this of one man lifting a small child from the bus window and embracing the baby before safely lowering them back down. We have team coverage, but first in studio with me, Michael Ratney, former U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia, U.S. Consul General in Jerusalem, and former special envoy for Syria under President Obama. Ambassador, great to have you here.
Thanks, Kira.
Quite the day.
Indeed.
Just your overall impressions of this moment.
So really remarkable. Really, in just a few hours time span, we've seen these hostages released and reunited with their families. We've seen large numbers of Palestinian prisoners released. We've seen President Trump addressing the Knesset. And now we see President Trump in Egypt meeting with a huge number of global leaders. It's quite a moment. I think it's gratifying for almost everybody involved, certainly for the hostages and their families, certainly for the Gazans that finally have a moment of peace without airstrikes. Now it creates huge pressure for what comes next. These next phases will be, I think, even more difficult.
And when looking at this deal, Trump clearly getting a lot of praise from these world leaders. But the secret sauce, Jared Kushner?
Well, sure. I mean, this was a serious moment. It got close, and I think Jared Kushner is somebody who, although he hasn't had a formal role in the administration in this Trump term, he knows the file, and President Trump knows he knows the file, and regional leaders, whether the Israelis or the Palestinians or others, know when he walks in the room, he speaks for President Trump. And so I think that made a difference.
Stay with me, Ambassador. I want to bring you in on this conversation. Our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, is in the region. She joins me now. Also, our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, along with our other chief foreign correspondent, James Longman. All three of you covering an incredible moment here that we have witnessed since the early morning hours in the United States. Ian, let's start with you.
I mean, an incredibly emotional day for many, many Israelis. And there must have been like 60 to 70,000 here. I've never seen Hostage Square so packed. This represented the end of a long 2-year nightmare. Now, of course, it isn't entirely closure. The hostages, the living hostages who returned today, will have a long, difficult process ahead of them. They will have medical issues. There'll be psychological issues that will have to be dealt with. But nevertheless, they were able to hold their loved ones once again in their arms. Now, we know that there was supposed to be 48 hostages. 20 of the living hostages came out today. There were supposed to be 28 deceased hostages, bodies released. Well, only 4 have been released. And the Family and Hostage Forum, which has been so pivotal in keeping the public's attention focused on the plight of their loved ones, is very unhappy about that, saying that Hamas has reneged on the deal. And the Israeli Defense Minister has also echoed those remarks. So we're not entirely through that crisis before we even begin to talk about phase 2. But it is remarkable what President Trump has managed to achieve here. And I think there are a couple of things. Firstly, we've talked a lot about his sheer force of will, in some senses ignoring the reality as most people understood it, and he's had the ability to almost create his own reality. But also that close alliance with so many key Gulf states. Remember, President Trump's ultimate aim here is for a wider Middle East peace settlement, an expansion of the Abraham Accords, and ultimately normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Well, all of those countries, Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and others, will have been telling President Trump and his negotiators that there will be no normalization until the war in Gaza is settled and reconstruction happens. So there has actually been pressure from both sides, but it's because of his relationship with them that he's been receptive to that and been able to push it through. But please spare a thought for the Palestinians. Of course, the Gazans are relieved that the guns have fallen silent, but we cannot overstate the level of destruction, the level of trauma, the level of disaster that has befallen people who are caught between Hamas and the Israeli Defense Forces. Already, hundreds of bodies underneath the rubble are starting to be recovered as Israeli hostage families await their loved ones. So many Gazans also waiting to find out what happened to their relatives. Where are they? Will they even ever find the bodies? Again, before you even begin to talk about reconstruction. And just one final thought. Once you get through all these stages of the peace plan, it still leaves the question of Palestinian statehood unresolved. And that, at its essence, is what this conflict has always been about. The Palestinians say that they were thrown off their land during the establishment of the State of Israel, and they are entitled to share the land. And that is a conundrum that no one has ever quite resolved. As long as they dispute the land, there will be conflict. If they can agree to share the land, then perhaps this is the beginning of the end. Kira?
Ian, thank you so much. Mary Bruce, I'll bring you in on top of that. In addition to Palestinian statehood and that discussion, Trump was asked on Air Force One about an armed Hamas acting as a police force in Gaza. Trump said he's given the approval for that for a, quote, period of time.
Yeah, and that, I'm sure, is one thing that is being discussed behind closed doors in this summit, because, of course, how you secure Gaza is just one of the many, many questions that remains here. It is sort of the first question, though, because once you have security, then you can move to how to rebuild before you get to the question of who is going to govern going forward. And, of course, going back to Ian's very important point here, it is notable President Trump did not mention in any of his remarks here today, in either of his two major speeches, the future of a Palestinian state. Now, it is worth reminding that in his 20-point peace plan, it does state that this perhaps may pave the way for Palestinian statehood. But President Trump himself in recent days has not wanted to go that far. Speaking to us reporters at the White House just a few days ago, when asked whether he supports a two-state solution, he basically said he doesn't have a view on it, that he's going to go with whatever they decide to do. He's refusing to take sides on that. And that is going to be a major, if not the biggest, sticking point in all of this. But first, as we've been discussing, they have to get through the nuts and bolts of what comes next. The president, as we've been saying, has declared flatly that the war is over. That is a declaration that Prime Minister Netanyahu has yet to agree with. Certainly, President Trump deserves and is getting much deserved credit for this first phase. The president has been touting this, hailing it as a new day in the Middle East, referring to it essentially as a launching off point for future peace in the region. And of course, as Ian mentioned, he does have grander ambitions here, but you have to solve this problem first. And that is no easy task. And the president now meeting with these leaders who are going to have to somehow come up with a plan so that President Trump's declaration that the war is over can actually come to fruition. And there is a lot of questions. Who pays for this? Who devotes forces to this? Who's in there helping with reconstruction? What happens to Palestinians in Gaza who want and need to leave? Because, of course, as we've been mentioning, the devastation and destruction there is just traumatic. I mean, you have seen these images of so many racing back towards Gaza City, trying and struggling in many cases just to find the rubble of their homes. So the task ahead is incredibly daunting. President Trump here taking a much deserved victory lap, but there are a lot of incredibly thorny issues still to come. Though the president seems that he will be at the center of these negotiations, he's going to be the chairman of this peace force. We have heard from his negotiators. Steve Witkoff says that he's already working on implementation. Jared Kushner's role remains a question, but of course he was incredibly instrumental in getting us to this point. So President Trump putting himself front and center in this effort to finally reach lasting peace. The question is, can he get there?
Mary, thank you. Let's bring in our James Longman, who has been talking about that all morning. James, talk to us about this Board of Peace, this body that will oversee the traditional governance of Gaza by a Palestinian committee. And also, you've been talking about this Palestinian movement right now. Is that something we are really seeing? Are we seeing a united Palestinian movement?
Well, not yet. I mean, at the moment, Palestinians in Gaza are picking up the pieces of what remains of their lives. So thinking about a political future at the moment will be well in the distance because it's still a struggle for survival. On that Board of Peace, I mean, let's just take you back to what we've just witnessed there at this extraordinary press conference, which at times I think it's fair to say was rather surreal. I think a highlight for me was when Donald Trump turned around to the Prime Minister of Pakistan and just asked him off the cuff to come and speak. And then later, when he was going through the list of world leaders, turned back and said, "You're going to have peace with India." I mean, that's another, if you like, generational conflict. And the way in which Donald Trump talks about these issues, his manner, is incredibly disarming. And you get a glimpse of it when you see him talking to other world leaders, because so much of this usually goes on behind closed doors. His joke with Emmanuel Macron that he usually likes the limelight, but actually he was off to one side. Saw Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, burst into laughter behind him. So when you have these moments where you get an insight into how Donald Trump operates, you see how a deal like this might have happened. I mean, there aren't many other leaders who walk in to the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, to an enormous welcome, a warm welcome, rapturous applause, endless plaudits, and then an hour later walks into a room full of Arab and Muslim leaders and gets a similarly warm welcome. I mean, him and President Sisi of Egypt, again, very close. It was the Egyptians who presented to the White House the Arab plan for Gaza, very different to what the White House had earlier suggested, where Palestinians would be forced to leave. There's an Arab reconstruction, which the Egyptians put forward together with those Gulf states. So it's Donald Trump's force of personality that seems to have got this particular deal over the line. But I will take some issue with one of the phrases that Donald Trump used today, which is where he said he thinks he's done the hardest part. That is, I mean, blatantly just not true. He's done a very difficult thing to bring all these people into one room together to have the conversation. But where the conversation leads, that will be the hardest part. And this is a conflict that, in his words, has gone on for decades, for generations, and that he wants it to end won't be enough. He wants the Russia-Ukraine war to end. He had a summit in Alaska and made it clear to Vladimir Putin that that's what he wanted, but we're yet to see the fruits of that conversation. This is so much more complex. There are so many more actors involved. One reason why we do have a reason for some hope, and we're looking at pictures there of him talking to the Indonesian leader. Muslim countries are going to be asked to step up here, to take responsibility, ownership perhaps in some way for the Palestinian situation and Gaza more broadly. The Indonesians perhaps putting up forces as part of this international stabilization force that Donald Trump has spoken about in this 20-point plan. But more than that, the actors involved in this are so numerous that the prospects for peace are that much smaller. But the reason why there's optimism is because if you just think about October 6th, Hezbollah in Lebanon was a very, very potent force. Assad in Syria was still there. The Iranian nuclear facilities were still intact. All this time later, and pretty much every one of Israel's main enemies in the region have been taken off the board. So is there the possibility that perhaps Hamas now has no future, has no choice but to enter into a negotiation which does see it disarm? That is the gamble. That is what the White House is hoping for. But we are a very long way from seeing that happen. And we're even further away from seeing a viable Palestinian state. Kira.
A gamble indeed. Our James Longman, thank you so much. And as you can imagine, in Hostage Square, a lot of rejoicing, a lot of parties, a lot of reuniting since early this morning, our time. It is a little more calm, a little more quiet, but filling up, no doubt, with more people as we continue to follow the news of this historic moment. The president wrapping up now his talk with more than 20 countries and the leaders from those countries surrounding him as he talked about this first phase of bringing the hostages home in this deal that he has come together and created with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff by his side. Let's bring in our retired Army Colonel Seth Crumrick. James was talking about phase two. It seems that is where a lot of the skepticism now rests. Seth, you have Hamas, which it doesn't look like has begun in any way, shape, or form to put down their arms, because they will be acting as somewhat of a pseudo police force now, as we heard the president of the United States say that he has agreed to that for a period of time. Your thoughts?
I think that when you look at what's happening and the speed that it's happening, it's important to understand that phase two, the center of gravity, the most important piece of this now, it's the Palestinian people and, frankly, their well-being. That strong investment that has to happen. And it has to happen from everyone that you saw on the stage and that everyone that President Trump talked about on the stage. One of the key differentials here, though, is that President Trump has put 9 years of investment in those personal relationships. This didn't just happen over the last year or 2 years. This has been a longstanding relationship build for during his first administration and then during the Biden administration, whether there were business dealings or other pieces, that trust was there. That trust won the day today to get a lot of world leaders that don't agree with each other together to take on this really complex issue. And to your question on phase two, that trust is going to take on an even heavier gravity. So the key here is going to be investing in the Palestinian people, keeping those Arab teams together to really focus on what will come next. Will there be a Palestinian state? What does that look like in time and space? When do you have to make those decisions? And to your point, Hamas is still out there. It will take years for them to demilitarize. You look at the IRA, it took 9 years to demilitarize the IRA. And don't forget, Iran is still in play. They are still out there. They are still a negative, bad actor that can affect the situation. So there's a lot ahead. And I agree. I think the hardest days are still ahead.
And on top of that, Mary Bruce, we are seeing these prisoners being released from custody in Israel. Do we know anything more about who they are and how that is going to be playing into all of this and the security within the region?
Yeah, well, certainly that is what was part of this deal in exchange for releasing the hostages, was that nearly 2,000 prisoners be released back to Gaza. You are seeing those rather emotional pictures of those buses pulling in. I think of that image of the man lifting up a baby and kissing him through the window. I keep thinking also how shocking it must be for them to see the state of Gaza. I would imagine that many of these prisoners have not been able to see much news coverage of this. And so for them to pull back into Gaza and see the conditions there are pretty astounding. Of course, as you've been discussing, one of the big questions here is, how does Hamas disarm? What guarantees will there be of that? What guarantees are there that Israel will not resume its campaign, especially given that Netanyahu has said, has not gone so far as to say that the war is over? There's a lot of trust that is involved here. And of course, to get to this point, President Trump made pretty clear that he had to be pretty tough on Netanyahu. He had to exert some extreme pressure on a key ally. And I think he noted that Bibi Netanyahu can be tough back, but there are going to be a lot more of those kinds of conversations. The president also, I think it's important to remember, in recent weeks, took steps that showed his credibility to Hamas. When you think about how critical the attack that Israel launched, those strikes on Hamas leaders in Qatar, I think at the time when that happened last month, so many thought that it was a step away from peace. In hindsight, it actually turned out to be a critical moment in actually leading to this point, because President Trump was infuriated. In fact, he went on Twitter, on social media, and said that he was very unhappy with Benjamin Netanyahu. And in response, I think by showing that he was taking a stand and being tough on Netanyahu, that he was reaching out to the leader of Qatar, the emir who President Trump has a long-standing relationship with, something he just mentioned in those remarks. President Trump then shortly after issuing assurances that Israel would never launch an attack like that again. He, of course, announced security guarantees for Qatar, NATO-like security guarantees for Qatar. And, of course, just 2 weeks ago when Benjamin Netanyahu was visiting the White House, he essentially forced Netanyahu to get on the phone and apologize to the emir of Qatar for that attack and promise that it won't happen again. And I think those are the kinds of things that Hamas was likely watching closely to see that the president is able to stand up to Benjamin Netanyahu. And, of course, the president tried to get Netanyahu a seat at the table today on his way over here. I'm told the president, once again, got Netanyahu on the phone. He forced him to speak to, got him connected to the Egyptian president, El-Sisi, their first conversation since the war began. The president essentially saying that Netanyahu should be invited to the table today at this summit. El-Sisi invited him. Netanyahu later declined, citing the Jewish holiday. But it shows, I think, the role that the president will likely play as these negotiations go on, trying to at least open these lines of communications and get people talking. Because, of course, it is notable. You have these 20 countries here. You have this tremendous buy-in from the region, everyone hoping that this will lead to lasting peace despite the thorny issues. But the two main players are not at the table. Now, Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian president, is there. But, of course, you don't have representatives of Hamas and you don't have Netanyahu at the table. So they have to come up with solutions here and then get the principals on board. And there are a lot of just nuts and bolts issues here. You know, how do you get aid into the people of Gaza, into the Palestinians who are living in just complete destruction and destitution? How do you go about creating a kind of security force with the hopes that Hamas will ultimately disarm, as is outlined in the 20-point plan? How do you rebuild? Who pays for it? Who brings in that equipment? Who's providing forces? I mean, the list goes on and on and on. All these things that have to be worked out. But for today, a huge moment for President Trump, a huge moment of joy, celebration, jubilation, a collective sigh of relief for so many in this country and around the world and in Gaza. And I think a lot of cautious optimism about where this may go. Kira.
Let's follow up with you, Ambassador, on what Mary just said. The issue of pressure. Okay, clearly a lot of pressure was put on Egypt, Qatar, Turkey. We saw all those leaders represented there behind the president with the big Peace 2025 moment. And he did point to Abbas in the crowd. You know, he wasn't up there, but he did point to Mahmoud Abbas. But Mary brings up such a good point. Still, we're not seeing Netanyahu and we're not seeing a representative from Hamas. What does that tell you about where we are right now?
So there was a lot of pressure on Netanyahu from Trump. I think Trump took him well out of his comfort zone to get as far as this ceasefire. Trump has extraordinary leverage with Netanyahu, and that leverage is because Trump is just so popular in Israel. It's more popular than Netanyahu, more popular than probably any Israeli politician, but he's been reluctant to use it. He used that leverage to get to this ceasefire. And as some of your correspondents have noted, Netanyahu hasn't totally publicly embraced all of the rhetoric that Trump has talked about: an end to the conflict, an end to peace, a ceasefire.
Should we be nervous about that?
Well, I think it was inevitable in a sense, because on the one hand, Netanyahu is not going to say no to Trump. Netanyahu now has the hostages out, and he doesn't want to do anything to mess that up. But on the other hand, he has this extremely radical coalition that he's balancing as well that doesn't like many of these things. They don't like the idea of a ceasefire while Hamas is still in some way, shape, or form intact in Gaza. He doesn't like the idea. They don't like the idea of releasing all of these Palestinian prisoners back to Gaza and the West Bank. They don't like any of it. And so even while Netanyahu is going to put the best face on it for Trump, he also has to balance his political coalition at home. So he's facing pressure from a lot of different directions.
Let's bring in our James Longman, who's been covering that side of things for us for a long period of time out there in the region. James, this radical coalition the ambassador is referring to, also those prisoners that are being released, you know, do we know anything more about them and how that's going to impact how all of this flushes out in phase 2? And also we've received reporting as well from sources to our Matt Gutman here that Hamas is already looking at regrouping.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, on those prisoners, the deal was that nearly 2,000 prisoners would be released. Hamas was pushing for certain names. There were individuals who have been convicted of killing Israelis, those who took part in the October 7th attack. A lot of this very unpopular. Of course, it's unpopular with Israelis more broadly. But time and time again, the hostage families said whatever it takes. It didn't matter to them. Whatever needed to happen, they needed their loved ones home. And that is part of the reason why those prisoners have been released. There's also a deal to release for every body, every dead Israeli captive that is released, 15 bodies of dead Palestinians who've died whilst in Israeli detention are also released. So there's this ongoing exchange happening in the background. On that regrouping of Hamas, well, we had a call for mobilization just a couple of days ago from Hamas. It's reported some 7,000 fighters, young men called up to serve to secure the parts of Gaza that the IDF had withdrawn from. Now, there is lawlessness in Gaza. There are gangs that are not affiliated to Hamas, that are armed, that do operate. And we actually heard from Donald Trump, who was asked directly, I think, on the plane over here from Israel about this idea that Hamas might still be kind of an armed force for the moment. And he said, well, that's part of the deal. There's a transitional moment. You expect, he said, that there'd be some kind of police force and it would be manned by Hamas. He said more than 60,000 people have been killed there. They've got to regroup in some way. So, look, this is to be expected. But what happens after this transitional period, that is when things get sticky. And the trick here will be for people to try to focus on what's most important, which is peace, rather than listen to the extremes. There are all kinds of scenarios that might destabilize this. There are people inside Gaza who might decide to start firing rockets at Israelis. There could be another terror attack on the streets of Jerusalem. There could be more calls in the Israeli Knesset and from parts of the more extreme. More settlement building, particularly in a very sensitive area between East Jerusalem and the rest of the West Bank, in order to cut off the possibility of there ever being a Palestinian state and a future capital of a Palestinian state. So these extremist voices will always be there, but the trick to peace, and if you listen to someone like Tony Blair, who is there today, and he was one of the architects of the 1998 Good Friday Agreement that brought the conflict in Northern Ireland to an end, is that you have to involve all parties, but try to avoid the noise on the extremes. David Trimble, who was a very, very important part of that, he said, everyone knows what peace looks like. And if you take the Good Friday Agreement as an example, Stormont was an earlier draft of the peace agreement that wouldn't get signed for some years. It was pretty much exactly the same deal. It's just you needed the right people in the right place at the right time with trust. And Donald Trump is hoping that he's one of those people. Trust is the big issue. There's been an enormous breakdown in trust, even if there ever was at the beginning of all this. These last 2 years of war have been devastating. The lives of so many hostages and their families blighted by this. More than 900 soldiers from the IDF killed inside Gaza. And of course, the more than 60,000 Palestinians who've been killed and the many more, tens of thousands who've lost absolutely everything. So when trust is at an all-time low, how do you ignore the noises on the extremes and focus on peace? That is the challenge. That's what Donald Trump, the gauntlet that he's laid down. We'll see if it's possible. Kira.
Let's get back to that word trust. James, thank you. Let's go to Christian Cordero. Clearly, there was trust in President Trump. There was trust in Jared Kushner. And there was also trust in Special Envoy Steve Witkoff.
Really, for the past several months, Kira, when this administration came into play, when it came to these larger peace talks, we saw Special Envoy Steve Witkoff travel to the region several times, have these discussions with various world leaders, Arab leaders, and Israeli leaders alike. And then more recently, we saw the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, enter the picture. And as we have noted, right, bringing a little bit more of that business negotiation tactic into the conversations themselves. And when it comes to Steve Witkoff, one thing that stood out that was really interesting today is he said that they are going to stay dug into the region. So as you heard James very eloquently lay out how challenging this is moving forward, that the hardest parts are in fact still ahead. The path forward has not yet fully been tested. Although there is a plan in place and there are many parts of today that are worth celebrating, there are key crucial moments that feel very fragile. And one thing Steve Witkoff said today is that they are going to stay in the region. We are going to, quote unquote, be here quite a bit. That's at the direction of the president. And that's probably going to be one of the most important phases here, is what the special envoy said. Kira, we'll see how it all plays out.
We sure will. And Seth, I want to bring you back as a retired Army colonel and just talk to you about the U.S. role here, U.S. troops, and when exactly we are going to see that presence, what the role will be as phase one has already been put into the chute and we start to enter phase two.
Absolutely. When you think about the U.S.'s role, the best way to describe it is the humanitarian coordination center that they're putting together. It's part humanitarian expertise and it's part logistics. And no one does logistics like the U.S. military does. So you're in good hands with that framework. The key, though, is going to be the International Stabilization Force. When we think about all of those leaders that we saw that are going to have to, pony up and provide soldiers to walk the streets, to provide those resources coming in, that's where you're going to see those friction points. That's where that trust and personal relationships are going to be coming in together. And look, there's been some historical friction out there. We think back to not too long ago with Saudi Arabia and UAE and their disastrous, efforts in Yemen against the Houthis. There's still some scar tissue there. And all of these leaders have to respond, and they've got to report back to their domestic populations. They're accountable. So it's going to be very difficult to balance all those things. So besides the resourcing and the logistics, there is going to be delicate, very culturally attuned leadership that's going to be required from some significant U.S. military and U.S. diplomats to make sure that phase two can go. But the number one thing to watch is this, the investment into the Palestinians' well-being. You put your money where your mouth is. Action matters, not words. Show me how you're taking care of the Palestinian people, whether it's social services, reconstruction, and I'll show you if success is possible.
Seth, thank you. I also want to bring in our presidential historian, Mark Updegrove. Now, Mark, Trump has compared his envoy, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, actually to Henry Kissinger. He made that comparison today in terms of both of their impact on foreign policy. What do you make of that?
Well, Kissinger was certainly important in Richard Nixon's efforts to strike peace in the Middle East. He was his emissary, and there was what was called at the time shuttle diplomacy. That was Henry Kissinger getting on a plane, going into the Middle East, and going through these hard negotiations with different powers. And that's what Witkoff and, to a large extent, Jared Kushner did here. You mentioned it earlier in the broadcast, Kira, that Jared Kushner was certainly the secret sauce in the Abraham Accords, which was a triumph of the first Trump administration and his very controversial administration. That was one unambiguous triumph. So I think that the comparison is apt. Witkoff certainly played an important role in this negotiation along with Jared Kushner.
So, Mark, we saw this pretty remarkable scene at the Knesset this morning, and the attendees there were wearing MAGA-style hats, calling Trump the peace president. What do you make of the president's role in just reshaping global diplomacy now?
Well, this is certainly an important step forward in that region, particularly, Kira, the release of the hostages. They've been held captive for 2 harrowing years. We have to remember that the Gaza or the Hamas attacks on Israel happened on October 7th, 2 years ago. So they've been held captive for that long. That is a big symbolic breakthrough in this negotiation. But we have to also remember that these peace agreements are very, very fragile. That cannot be overstated. We have to remember earlier this year, Biden, in the closing days of his administration, had negotiated a ceasefire. It quickly went awry. Hamas does not go away. Iran, the proxy of Hamas, does not go away. We don't yet have a resolution to the Palestinian independent state question. So many things here remain to be seen. So yes, this is a big breakthrough for Donald Trump. This is an important step forward, but a lot remains to be seen, Kira.
Yeah, that is so true. And we're actually looking at live pictures right now, Mark. The president apparently arriving at the airport. They're getting ready to take off and come back to the United States. There he is, heading up to board Air Force One after a pretty remarkable, let's see, I'm trying to count the hours, more than 20 hours. He has been nonstop, coming into the region, making a speech, gathering with all those leaders, and now heading back to the United States. Ambassador, as we continue to watch these live pictures of the president getting ready to head back home after quite the whirlwind of a historic tour, just playing off what Mark Updegrove just said and just talking about peace in the region. When you looked at all those leaders standing behind the president for the signing, everybody supporting him, some of them coming up and taking the mic. Let's talk about how important it's going to be with those regional parties to make sure this does stick, right, and that there is overall stability in the entire area.
Right. I'd love to believe that phase one was the easy part. The rest of this is going to be really, really tough. And two big issues, right? One is, as some of your colleagues have talked about, creation of a stabilization force in Gaza. And the second is humanitarian assistance and ultimately reconstruction. Both of those elements will rely on regional parties, not just the region, the Arab world, also Europe, the United States, and others in some kind of a cohesive effort. But when you look at all of those global leaders sitting with President Trump in Sharm el-Sheikh, I think a lot of them, as we talked about, pressure goes both ways. Trump is pressuring them to stay engaged. They, in some sense, are pressuring Trump to also stay engaged and to remind Trump that reconstruction, stabilization force, any of this doesn't come out of thin air. And for a lot of these regional governments, it requires more than just an end to the war. It requires a political commitment to a long-term solution for the Palestinians. The Arab governments in particular have said repeatedly they don't want to spend a lot of money unless they know that this is truly part of a plan that involves a political pathway for the Palestinians. And frankly, regional governments, even those that might be inclined to participate in a stabilization force, want to know that the violence has really ended. They don't want to get shot at by either Hamas or the Israelis. They want to know that they have something that's enduring.
So, James, let's talk about that, something that's enduring. I mean, when you're talking about the stabilization force in Gaza, the aid into the region, reconstruction. I mean, all of these leaders standing behind Trump today have to take part in that, or do they?
I think they absolutely do. And it's been one of the big criticisms of the Arab and Muslim world specifically is that they haven't been there to stand up for the Palestinians. I mean, if you think just back to the Arab Spring in 2011, 2012, after that, there was a huge kind of earthquake through the region. And then it was about Arab countries trying to consolidate power, survive after massive protest movements in their countries. And slowly but surely, institutional memory fades. And the Palestinian issue was not front and center any longer in the minds, especially of the leaders of these regions. And there's been huge anger at that. And actually, we haven't seen huge numbers of Arabs out on the street all the time about this issue until this war. And that's one of the reasons why, the Israelis are very, very sensitive and nervous about the idea that this was a big propaganda win for Hamas, because they kind of solidified the Palestinian issue in the minds of not just the Arab and Muslim world, but the wider world. And if you look actually now at polling in the United States, the opinions of the Israelis have actually gone down, negative views of the Israelis since the beginning of this war. And people are feeling much more strongly about the Palestinian people, the plight of the Palestinian people is part of the reason why we've seen these protests around the world. And we've seen today in the Knesset, Israeli leaders talking about that, how they felt that those protests were a betrayal of some kind. I'm just listening out because actually I'm not far from the airport here in Sharm el-Sheikh, where we expect Donald Trump's plane to roar into action. And then you may hear that in the background. But yes, this has been something which has been a huge issue on the Arab street for some time, but neglected by Arab leaders. But now it is front and center in the minds of so many people watching around the world. And the proof will be in the pudding whether these countries will really come together to try to support, in the first instance, the well-being of the Palestinian people in Gaza. Because that has to be the priority first and foremost. Before conversations happen about a political solution, you've got, more than 2 million people who are living basically without anything. It's not just buildings that have been destroyed, sanitation systems, water, electricity. It is really an entire country needs to be rebuilt. So when that has happened, then slowly but surely, and perhaps in parallel, conversations can happen about a political solution and what the Palestinian movement actually looks like, because for so long it's been divided, of course, between Hamas in Gaza and the Palestinian Authority in the occupied West Bank. But the PA has really lacked legitimacy for so long. And part of the reason why the movement is divided, and part of the reason why Netanyahu spent so long dividing that movement, in order that there was not one united front to negotiate with. Perhaps all that is going to change, but we're a long, long way from any of that happening. In the first instance, as Donald Trump's plane takes off here, he's got to hope that even for the next 24 hours, this ceasefire holds.
And after addressing the world there from Egypt, as you said, James, we will soon hear Air Force One roaring out of country and back here home. James Longman, thank you. Christian Cordero, our Colonel Seth Crumrick, all of you, thank you. And Ambassador Michael Ratney, so great to have you here on set. I know you'll be with us throughout the day. Thank you. We're going to take a quick break. More of our continuing coverage straight ahead.
Whenever, wherever news breaks, it's so important to always remember that lives are changed. Here in London, in Buffalo, Uvalde, Texas, Edinburgh, Scotland.
From Poland once again tonight. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Ukrainian refugees here in Warsaw.
Do you think you'll ever be able to go back home? We're heading to a small community outside of Mexico City.
Splintered houses and splintered lives. The magnitude of the devastation.
You're streaming ABC News Live. Reporting from Rolling Fork, Mississippi.
Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Raleigh, North Carolina.
The U.S. Capitol.
Mayfield, Kentucky.
Minneapolis.
Mexico.
Tongass National Forest, Alaska.
Getting you behind the stories as they happen. Giving you a front row seat to our world as it plays out in real time, live. ABC News Live Prime. We'll take you there.
Stream ABC News Live weeknights, America's most honored streaming news program. Only on ABC News Live. Streaming free right now wherever you stream your news. Friday nights at 9 on ABC. Mean true crime.
True murder mystery.
Shocking.
Sex, betrayal, lies. A bombshell. The greatest true crime stories.
2020. Friday nights at 9. America's #1 news. ABC News. Now streaming 24/7 on Disney+.
Abby and Libby had gone on a walk, but we went to pick them up. They weren't there.
When the bodies were found, it felt different than any crime scene.
She captured the image of her own murderer.
Capturing their killer. The Girls on the High Bridge. Only on Hulu.
All across America.
Good morning. Hello.
Wherever we are.
Welcome home. It's good to be home.
It feels like home.
Hi. When's the last time we dropped our things and went? Woke up somewhere that we've both never been. Growing up doesn't mean
Good morning. How are you?
At the start of the day, letting us into your home. Putting the good in your morning.
Man, it's good to be home.
Like a river connects to the ocean, this pavement taxi wherever we're going. White lines flying by, who knows what we'll find, you and me tonight.
Good morning,
GMA.
Hey, everybody.
It's an invitation to come together.
Happy birthday.
Brighten your morning.
I'm George. How are you?
And the day ahead.
You're watching America's #1 streaming news, ABC News Live. Breaking news, exclusives, live reporting across the globe. Keep streaming with ABC News Live.
Well, today the skies are calm, the guns are silent, the sirens are still. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. Those are the words from President Trump as history is written in the Middle East. President Trump, surrounded by leaders from more than 20 countries, addressing the world from Egypt after both sides signed the first phase of the peace agreement. Trump calling this moment a historic dawn for the region, saying his administration was able to achieve what everyone thought was impossible. Take a listen.
Those prayers of millions have finally been answered. As you know, the hostages have been returned, and further work goes on having to do with the sadly to say, bodies. Together we've achieved what everybody said was impossible. Now the rebuilding begins. The rebuilding is maybe going to be the easiest part. I think we've done a lot of the hardest part because the rest comes together.
Families in Israel now celebrating as the last 20 living hostages are back home after 738 days in activity, each one of them pictured there. Those emotional and long-awaited reunions taking place in the early morning hours after Hamas handed over the remaining hostages to the Red Cross and into Israeli custody. Eboujar David, among those 20 hostages who came home to a hero's welcome, the Israeli clearly overcome with emotion as he was ushered to safety. Then just 2 months ago, he appeared in this video released by Hamas. It shows him in a tunnel, half-starved, digging his own grave. Joy radiating across Israel and across the border, where families in Gaza are also celebrating the ceasefire. Nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners will be released in the first phase of this deal. Busloads of prisoners already brought to Gaza, giving us gut-wrenching scenes like this of one man lifting a small child from the bus window and embracing him before lowering him back down. Let's bring in our chief international correspondent, James Longman, there in Sharm el-Sheikh. Also, ABC's Christian Cordero. So, James, set the scene for us right now as we get ready to see the president take off not far from where you are.
Well, I've just heard a plane. I don't know if that was indeed the plane, but I am near an airport, so it may not have been. But yes, a huge, huge day. I mean, first, let's just take us back to the scenes we saw this morning in Israel. I've been covering this war for more than 2 years. I've stayed in touch with the families of these hostages. It is their day today. They are the ones that made sure that their loved ones would come home. I mean, it really wasn't the priority of the Netanyahu administration in the days following the Hamas attack to try to get the hostages back. It was the Hostage Families Forum that made the government rethink. It was their pressure day after day, setting up a huge presence in Hostage Square, turning it in to Hostage Square, laying out vigils in front of Benjamin Netanyahu's private home. And yes, when Donald Trump came to office, it was their relationship with him that forced these hostages released, not just today's, but the ones that we've seen previous to today. Because without Donald Trump, this pure and simple just would not have happened. And, it's not me saying that. If you just ask the average Israeli, you see the signs, the flags inside Israel, you will see that that is very much the view. And just, we talk about the hostage families as a group, but I think it's really important to remember the individual, unique terror that these families went through. Some of them had no sign of life from their loved ones right through until only a few months ago, when they saw them on the backs of Hamas jeeps in Gaza. Many of the families could only go on what they'd heard from hostages who'd been released because they weren't getting any information from Hamas otherwise. Some of these hostages they've survived incredible injury, losing limbs, one of them losing an eye. Just horrific. And to not know if your loved one is coming home alive or dead is excruciating. So today is an extraordinary day for Israel. Finally, this nightmare is over. But it is not. The situation in the Middle East has not been resolved. This chapter is hopefully closed if the remains of the hostages who've been killed in captivity do eventually get returned to their loved ones inside Israel. But what happens next? Well, we're not sure. And that's what today's summit was about, setting out the plan. But we're a long way from seeing it realized. Kira.
And we're looking at the pictures that we referred to earlier on in the Knesset there, with members holding the MAGA-style caps, calling him the peacemaker. The headline across the Jerusalem Post calling him that such person. I mean, clearly, Christian, it's a big win for the Trump administration, but phase 2 may be the toughest part.
And the president, Kira, says that phase 2 is well underway, as if to will it into existence. And quite frankly, now is the time, as we've heard over and over again, right? There are so many crucial parts of this overall 20-point peace plan that need to fall into step in order for there to be lasting peace. And that in itself is such a simple statement for such a tall mountain to climb. But there's no doubt about it for how much the president has been able to take a victory lap today, both at the Knesset and then in Egypt, among, quite frankly, many world leaders, 34 world leaders from 4 continents, from Europe, from Asia, from North Africa and from North America, of course. And so you saw that, right? That display of diplomacy, the symbolic signature, declaring peace, actually achieving peace is a much bigger step. And it's something that with the world of our witness, we see the vows to make that come to fruition, Kira.
James Longman, Christian Cordero, thank you both so much. My next guest is an American citizen and Palestinian who left Gaza in 2005. Despite losing multiple family members during this war, he has been an advocate for both the hostages and the innocent Palestinians. He joins me once again on this historic day, Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib. Ahmed, we talked about this day. Didn't know if it was going to come. Your thoughts as you witness what is happening here. You're still a senior fellow at the head of Realign for Palestine at the Atlantic Council. This, I'm sure everybody has been talking about this since the early morning hours. Your thoughts?
Well, good to be back with you. I'm delighted that the hostages are finally out. They should have never been there in the first place. This concludes a dark chapter for many of those communities and folks who experienced some of the worst brutality of Hamas on that fateful day, October 7th. I'm also delighted that 1,700 Palestinians were reunited with their families and loved ones in the Gaza Strip. These are mainly innocent folks who had nothing to do with Hamas, with terrorism, with October 7th, who were scooped up by the Israeli military during very different phases of the war. And that actually includes one of my sister-in-law's brother was scooped up by the Israeli military in April of 2024. Unfortunately and sadly, he did not return quite yet. So we're hoping that he'll be maybe in a future batch, or we're not quite sure. Nevertheless, quite a day to mark maybe the end of a dark chapter, but lots of questions remain as to what's ahead, given that phase 2 is hopefully going to be concluded in the next day or two.
And Ahmed, let me follow up on that as we're looking at pictures here of the prisoners that are being released. I want to go back to your sister-in-law's brother, because we did talk about that the last time we were together and when he was arrested by the Israeli military in October of last year. Do you know anything? Have you heard about his condition? Do you know if he could be among this group of prisoners being released and being let out of Israeli custody?
Well, tragically, we have no idea. I mean, we don't even know if he's still alive. And this is the case. Actually, I was following up on multiple reports throughout the day that several families were shocked to see their loved ones back, many of whom were assumed to be dead or under the rubble. There are an estimated 5,000 to 10,000 people who might be under the rubble that their families have never been able to ascertain where they're at. But that's the sadness and the tragedy of this, is that the pain and the trauma will take years to unfold. And in the immediate term, there are still people desperate for any news of their loved ones. We do know that the Israeli authorities made it clear they won't be releasing any, Hamas terrorists who were involved in October 7th in the attack itself. But there have been estimates that at minimum, something like 2,000 to 3,000 Palestinians were arrested during the war in the Gaza Strip. And like I said, many of whom just happen to be at the wrong place and at the wrong time. So a lot of questions remain about their fates and when they'll ever, if ever, they'll be out.
Well, Ahmed, please stay in close touch and let us know if you do hear anything. We would like to hear more from this side, of course, of the story. Always appreciate you joining me.
Thank you.
You bet. And continuing with me here in studio, Michael Ratney. He served as U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia under the Biden administration, as well as the U.S. Consul General in Jerusalem and also special envoy for Syria under President Obama. You've been with me all afternoon listening to all sides, from our correspondents to the president to world leaders, and now even someone who has grown up a Palestinian, is here as an advocate, working as a senior fellow. Your thoughts as you kind of digest everything that we have heard to this moment, your thoughts and your concerns as we move forward.
So listening to all of your guests and actually seeing all these images in Israel as the hostages are released, seeing them and their families, seeing Palestinians joyful that they have a moment of calm after 2 years of violence, seeing regional leaders and global leaders joining with the U.S. president to try to galvanize their energies to make sure this thing never happens again. To see all that, it's not hard. It's hard not to get caught up in the joy of it. You know, certainly joy of the Israelis, joy of the families of these hostages, joy of Palestinians that have endured so much in Gaza. But it's also hard not to be sober about the challenges. This is a ceasefire. It's basically a cessation of hostilities, a hostage release, a prisoner release, and humanitarian aid. I'd like to say it was peace. It's not peace yet. In front of all of us, in front of the Israelis and the Palestinians and all of the regional parties that care about this is a lot of work. And that includes many of the measures that are on that 20-point plan that the White House released. Creation of a stabilization force to ensure that there's some modicum of security in Gaza. A reconstruction plan that'll cost tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars to allow Palestinians to resume something like normal life. And then ultimately, I think what President Trump heard from all of those regional leaders and all of those European leaders is it can't end here. There has to be some sort of a political pathway, a role for the Palestinian Authority, some pathway for Palestinian statehood to ensure that we don't have a repeat of this in a few years.
And how do you do that? Trump is talking about this peace board that will help create this. I mean, when you hear of that idea, what are your thoughts? Does that make sense? I mean, we've never heard of anything like that before.
Yeah, and I don't want to sound cynical about it. You know, it's easy to see the hostage release, have a global summit, take a victory lap, watch the hostages return to their families, and then move on to other things. It's a complicated world, right? But I think one of the advantages of President Trump meeting with all those global leaders is they're there to remind him that if we want their support in reconstruction and security, that we need to stay on our game, that the United States needs to stay behind this and work with the Israelis to ensure that they do support things that frankly, the Israeli Prime Minister has flatly ruled out, including at times a complete withdrawal from Gaza, or certainly any kind of a role for the Palestinian Authority. So, look, and it would be great to talk at length about all of these political measures, but what we really need right now is something that ensures that a ceasefire and a hostage release is more substantial, that it yields real security for Israelis and Palestinians, and it at least tells Palestinians that there's a pathway to some kind of normal life for them.
Ambassador, thank you.
Thank you.
In a region where we have had little diplomatic success for decades, President Trump appears to have accomplished a generational coup. Stay with us here on ABC News Live. We will have continuing coverage of the historic day in the Middle East, and we will bring you all the breaking developments as they happen. And in our next hour, we will speak with Daniel Sharibi, whose best friend, Yosef Yaim Ohana, was finally released today by Hamas after 2 very long years in captivity. We're also tracking a nor'easter slamming parts of the East Coast. Rena?
Well, Kira, I can tell you it is wet and windy here on Rockaway Beach in New York City. And the big threat with this storm is beach erosion and flooding. We'll have the latest coming up.
I'd never seen that many skeletal remains. Thousands. It's a serial killer case.
This killer, he's the dumber you've never heard of.
More and more men are going missing, and then the lead broke the case open. They discovered the farm.
The whole place was so bizarre.
There were mannequins, almost like it was a club.
I felt the presence of evil.
The largest number of unidentified human remains, second only to the World Trade Center.
Not many people live to tell about their involvement with the serial killer.
Everything we know about this case comes from you.
Absolutely.
Let's not do that. Ooh, I'm sorry.
Never before a face-to-face interview with a camera.
Why now?
Let me ask you, am I the evil culprit, the accomplice?
I'd like to know how the audience views me.
The Fox Hollow Murders, Playground of a Serial Killer. Only on Hulu.
Abby and Libby had gone on a walk, but we went to pick them up. They weren't there.
When the bodies were found, it felt different than any crime scene that I have ever seen.
She captured the image of her own murderer.
That Libby was able to get the video was very amazing.
There were dozens of viable suspects. Here's the rest of the story. Here's what they didn't tell you.
The person that did this is pure evil.
Capturing their killer. The Girls on the High Bridge. Only on Hulu.
The ruby slippers are the most famous shoes in the world.
What would the shoes be worth today?
A lot.
The shoes were stolen.
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 We worked together with the FBI.
Heaven only knows how many feet went into that pair of shoes.
There is more to this than anybody realizes.
Who knows where this is going to lead?
It's gonna get real.
So glad you're streaming with us. A powerful nor'easter is slamming the East Coast right now, bringing heavy rain, flooding streets, and damaging winds. There is some of what you're seeing there on the Jersey Shore. Both New York and New Jersey declaring states of emergency. Our senior meteorologist, Melissa Griffin, has been tracking it for us. Also, our Rena Roy is at Rockaway Beach in New York. So, Rena, why don't we start with you? Tell us what you're seeing out there.
Yeah, well, Kira, I can tell you it is really just a nasty day out here, right? It is still wet. It is still windy, as it has been for hours. And it's actually high tide right now. If you take a look right behind me, you can see the waves just crashing into the shore. We have seen flooding in some parts of New York City and really up and down the East Coast in several different states. And we just got word a short time ago that unfortunately there has been at least one storm-related death. And it was not too far from where we are right now, about 7 miles away on Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. Sunday morning, officials say that there was a solar panel attached to a carport that was ripped off by a gust of wind. It was carried 20 feet and it hit a 76-year-old woman in the head. She was taken to the hospital and pronounced dead, Kira.
So, Melissa, how much longer is this going to stick around?
Well, that's the problem, Kira, is the storm has been around for at least over 24 hours now, and it continues to pound the coastline. You can see the rain here. It is light in nature, but it's still wet out there. And that onshore flow, these winds that are just streaming right into places like the Jersey Shore, right up to southeastern New England, that's where we have the coastal issues that will continue. Again, as Rena mentioned, it is high tide coming in this afternoon, so we're seeing these coastal flood warnings. During that high tide flooding, where 1 to 3 feet of inundation is possible for places like Delaware, up through New Jersey into Long Island as well. The wind advisory sticking around for parts of Cape Cod. High surf up through Maine, where waves could reach up to 10 feet. So really this coastal storm bringing what is the brunt from places up and down the coast in the Northeast. We're going to see 50-mile-per-hour winds continue through this afternoon from Cape Cod down to the Jersey Shore. 30 to 40-mile-per-hour winds will continue into tonight before finally tomorrow those winds are going to start winding down and we're going to see the storm pulling away. Now with the rain, we're going to see the heaviest rain here in the Cape Cod area just south of Boston. Parts of New Jersey into Long Island could see an additional 1 to 2 inches of rain. But, Kira, for the most part, this storm will continue to pound the coast through tonight before it moves out late Tuesday. Kira.
All right. Melissa, Rena, thank you both. We'll stay in close touch throughout the day. Well, while the world is celebrating a historic moment in peace in the Middle East, back here at home, Democrats and Republicans are still divided as we enter day 13 of the government shutdown, and there's no end in sight. President Trump moved forward with his promise to fire government workers. In total, 4,000 federal employees got the axe. The administration says that number will rise the longer this drags on, too. Let's bring in our political director, Avery Harper, for more. Avery, what do we know?
Well, like you said, things are really at a standstill here in Washington, D.C. Lawmakers are out of town today for the federal holiday. We do know that the Senate is planning to take another vote tomorrow when those lawmakers return to Washington, D.C., but there's really no sign of compromise in sight. We saw the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. He did speak to reporters today. He's still blaming Democrats for the shutdown. In the meantime, we're tracking layoffs and firings across across multiple agencies. I think what's really important to remember here is that regardless of the finger pointing from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, one of the fundamental responsibilities of Congress is to fund the government, and lawmakers, regardless of party, have failed to do that.
All right, Avery Harper, thank you so much. Straight ahead, rescue crews go the extra mile to save a dog in distress. Next.
The news never stops. We are here in Israel, a nation at war.
We heard what appeared to be gunfire. The former president rushed off the stage.
Hurricane Helene ravaging the coastline of Florida.
It's moving really fast, screaming across the state.
And that's why ABC News Live never stops.
Taking you to the center of the story.
As news breaks live.
We hear the small arms fire around us.
We're right on the border between Ukraine and Russia.
ABC News Live is there for you at the start of your day, all morning live.
ABC News Live, right there, as events unfold across the day.
ABC News Live, breaking down the day's top stories.
The Menendez brothers, resentenced to 50 years to life.
ABC News Live Prime, going there, wherever the story is.
Are you going to build it back up?
And ABC News Live, lighting up the weekends.
With breaking news and all the latest pop headlines.
Happy Oscars Sunday.
A lot to watch for tonight.
ABC News Live.
Because the news never stops.
America's #1 news, ABC News, now streaming 24/7 on Disney+.
It's help, my fiance's on the floor with blood everywhere. Please hurry. There's a knife sticking out of her heart. Oh, no!
If you want to get away with a homicide, have it declared a suicide.
Death in Apartment 603, only on Hulu.
People don't just vanish on their way to work with no witnesses, no trace.
They found the car keys laying on the ground, red high-heeled shoes. You can see drag marks.
Welcome to Daybreak. I'm Jody Huisentruit.
KIMT News anchor Jody Huisentruit was just 27 at the time of her disappearance.
She told me she thought someone was following her. Maybe this is it. Maybe we're going to find her now.
Holy crap, this is really real.
Let's find Jody.
Her last broadcast, only on Hulu.
ABC's David Muir, the most watched newscast in America. More Americans watch World News Tonight with David Muir than any other newscast.
To the Murdochs, long may we live.
Amen.
There's been an accident.
The Murdochs are a South Carolina legal dynasty.
Did the Murdochs tell you not to talk to me?
How bad is this for us? These are very powerful people. Go to the mirror and see what that man has to say.
Reporting from the fires in Ventura County, California, I'm Mola Lengi. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
Well, some other top headlines that we're tracking for you this hour. Dramatic rescue in Arizona as crews airlift a dog that had fallen and could no longer walk. So you know what they did? Yep. Special harness, airborne, to get the pup out of that deep canyon in the Superstitious Mountains. It's really called the Superstitious Mountains, too. The pooch was then taken to a veterinarian for treatment. No word on the condition yet, but what a rescue. And to the delight of Swifties worldwide, yes, huge announcement from the megastar. You are going to see all the magic behind the scenes. Taylor Swift's historic Eras Tour. It's a docuseries and a new concert film on Disney Plus and Hulu. Both of those new projects will begin streaming December 12th. The Grammy Award-winning winner, proving once again it is Taylor's world and we're just living in it. And we're going to end on some gourd news. Hundreds of farmers hoping to squash the competition at the so-called Super Bowl of Pumpkin Way-Offs in California today. The farmer who grows the biggest jack-o'-lantern will take home a championship ring, along with our undying respect. We don't know the winner just yet, but we will tell you when we reported on this last year, the scales tipped at nearly 2,500 pounds. It's a lot of pumpkin pie, folks. The news never stops. You can find us anywhere you stream live news. And if you're on the go, we are on the ABC News app and abcnews.com, too. I'm Kira Phillips. Thanks for streaming with us. A lot more news up next.
I did not picture myself surviving through that day.
He was tracking her.
He was everywhere.
I heard the squeak of a floorboard. I've been kidnapped. This becomes a fight for my life.
And we're all holding our breath.
My mind is the only thing that's going to get me out of here.
Open the door!
This is a horror film.
Stalking Samantha. 13 Years of Terror. Only on Hulu.
What if that's all I did? I dated a zookeeper one time. So I'm trying to put it down, and she started quizzing me on animal sounds. She'd be like, I don't know, is that a red robin? And then she was like, is that a donkey? She goes, no, that's me, silly. I went through my little wannabe cholo stage myself, and I got jumped in a bathroom, you know? I got 12 staples in my head. I was immediately like, you know what? I think I'm gonna be an artist.
Okay, we want to know, who are the people in your state that make such a big difference?
Come on now. We all know someone who does so much.
And we want to celebrate them with you. So scan this QR code or go to goodmorningamerica.com. Tell us about them.
We're coming to all 50 states in 50 weeks to celebrate the best of what makes America beautiful.
When the grid takes over, every driver has to be ready. When the lights go out, instincts override. Machines become extensions of will, and there's no going back. The F1 United States Grand Prix on ABC and the all-new ESPN app, and experience Tron Ares now playing in theaters.
Reporting from Indianapolis at the WNBA All-Star Game, I'm Christiane Cordero. Wherever the story is, we will take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
I wanted love because I was lonely. So I went online.
He's a handsome man.
He was a very handsome man. He said to me, I love you.
And I started to fall in love with him. Then something crazy happened.
I've been scammed. I had lost everything.
And I was angry. I wanted to track him down. Maybe we could catch him.
I have secrets of my own.
You're watching America's #1 streaming news. Keep streaming with ABC News Live.
Well, today the skies are calm, the guns are silent, the sirens are still. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. Those are the words from President Trump as history is written in the Middle East. President Trump, surrounded by leaders from more than 20 countries, addressing the world from Egypt after both sides signed the first phase of the peace agreement. Trump calling this moment a historic dawn for the region, saying his administration was able to achieve what everyone thought was impossible. Take a listen.
Those prayers of millions have finally been answered. As you know, the hostages have been returned, and further work goes on having to do with the, sadly to say, bodies. Together we've achieved what everybody said was impossible. Now the rebuilding begins. The rebuilding is maybe going to be the easiest part. I think we've done a lot of the hardest part because the rest comes together.
Families in Israel now celebrating as the last 20 living hostages are back home after 738 days in activity. Each one of them pictured there. Those emotional and long-awaited reunions taking place in the early morning hours after Hamas handed over the remaining hostages to the Red Cross and into Israeli custody. Evojar David, among those 20 hostages who came home to a hero's welcome, the Israeli clearly overcome with emotion as he was ushered to safety. Then just 2 months ago, he appeared in this video released by Hamas. It shows him in a tunnel, half-starved, digging his own grave. Joy radiating across Israel and across the border, where families in Gaza are also celebrating the ceasefire. Nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners will be released in the first phase of this deal. Busloads of prisoners already brought to Gaza, giving us gut-wrenching scenes like this of one man lifting a small child from the bus window and embracing him before lowering him back down. Let's bring in our chief international correspondent, James Longman, there in Sharm el-Sheikh. Also, ABC's Christian Cordero. So, James, set the scene for us right now as we get ready to see the president take off not far from where you are.
Well, I've just heard a plane. I don't know if that was indeed the plane, but I am near an airport, so it may not have been. But yes, a huge day. I mean, first, let's just take us back to the scenes we saw this morning in Israel. I've been covering this war for more than 2 years. I've stayed in touch with the families of these hostages. It is their day today. They are the ones that made sure that their loved ones would come home. I mean, it really wasn't the priority of the Netanyahu administration in the days following the Hamas attack to try to get the hostages back. It was the Hostage Families Forum that made the government rethink. It was their pressure day after day, setting up a huge presence in Hostage Square, turning it in to Hostage Square, laying out vigils in front of Benjamin Netanyahu's private home. And yes, when Donald Trump came to office, it was their relationship with him that forced these hostages released, not just today's, but the ones that we've seen previous to today. Because without Donald Trump, this pure and simple just would not have happened. And, it's not me saying that. If you just ask the average Israeli, you see the signs, the flags inside Israel, you will see that that is very much the view. And just, we talk about the hostage families as a group, but I think it's really important to remember the individual, unique terror that these families went through. Some of them had no sign of life from their loved ones right through until only a few months ago, when they saw them on the backs of Hamas jeeps in Gaza. Many of the families could only go on what they'd heard from hostages who'd been released, because they weren't getting any information from Hamas otherwise. Some of these hostages they've survived incredible injury, losing limbs, one of them losing an eye. Just horrific. And to not know if your loved one is coming home alive or dead is excruciating. So today is an extraordinary day for Israel. Finally, this nightmare is over. But it is not. The situation in the Middle East has not been resolved. This chapter is hopefully closed if the remains of the hostages who've been killed in captivity do eventually get returned to their loved ones inside Israel. But what happens next? Well, we're not sure. And that's what today's summit was about, setting out the plan. But we're a long way from seeing it realized. Kira.
And we're looking at the pictures that we referred to earlier on in the Knesset there, with members holding the MAGA-style caps, calling him the peacemaker. The headline across the Jerusalem Post calling him that such person. I mean, clearly, Christian, it's a big win for the Trump administration, but phase 2 may be the toughest part.
And the president, Kira, says that phase 2 is well underway, as if to will it into existence. And quite frankly, now is the time, as we've heard over and over again, right? There are so many crucial parts of this overall 20-point peace plan that need to fall into step in order for there to be lasting peace. And that in itself is such a simple statement for such a tall mountain to climb. But there's no doubt about it for how much the president has been able to take a victory lap today, both at the Knesset and then in Egypt, among, quite frankly, many world leaders, 34 world leaders from 4 continents, from Europe, from Asia, from North Africa, and from North America, of course. And so you saw that, right? That display of diplomacy, the symbolic signature, declaring peace, actually achieving peace is a much bigger step. And it's something that with the world of our witness, we see the vows to make that come to fruition, Kira.
James Longman, Christian Cordero, thank you both so much. My next guest is an American citizen and Palestinian who left Gaza in 2005. Despite losing multiple family members during this war, he has been an advocate for both the hostages and the innocent Palestinians. He joins me once again on this historic day, Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib. Ahmed, we talked about this day. Didn't know if it was going to come. Your thoughts as you witness what is happening here. You're still a senior fellow at the head of Realign for Palestine at the Atlantic Council. This, I'm sure everybody has been talking about this since the early morning hours. Your thoughts?
Well, good to be back with you. I'm delighted that The hostages are finally out. They should have never been there in the first place. This concludes a dark chapter for many of those communities and folks who experienced some of the worst brutality of Hamas on that fateful day, October 7th. I'm also delighted that 1,700 Palestinians were reunited with their families and loved ones in the Gaza Strip. These are mainly innocent folks who had nothing to do with Hamas, with terrorism, with October 7th, who were scooped up by the Israeli military during very different phases of the war. And that actually includes one of my sister-in-law's brother was scooped up by the Israeli military in April of 2024. Unfortunately and sadly, he did not return quite yet. So we're hoping that he'll be maybe in a future batch, or we're not quite sure. Nevertheless, quite a day to mark maybe the end of a dark chapter, but lots of questions remain as to what's ahead, given that phase 2 is hopefully going to be concluded in the next day or two.
And Ahmed, let me follow up on that as we're looking at pictures here of the prisoners that are being released. I want to go back to your sister-in-law's brother, because we did talk about that the last time we were together and when he was arrested by the Israeli military in October of last year. Do you know anything? Have you heard about his condition? Do you know if he could be among this group of prisoners being released and being let out of Israeli custody?
Well, tragically, we have no idea. I mean, we don't even know if he's still alive. And this is the case. Actually, I was following up on multiple reports throughout the day that several families were shocked to see their loved ones back, many of whom were assumed to be dead or under the rubble. There are an estimated 5,000 to 10,000 people who might be under the rubble that their families have never been able to ascertain where they're at. But that's the sadness and the tragedy of this, is that the pain and the trauma will take years to unfold. And in the immediate term, there are still people desperate for any news of their loved ones. We do know that the Israeli authorities made it clear they won't be releasing any, Hamas terrorists who were involved in October 7th in the attack itself. But there have been estimates that at minimum, something like 2,000 to 3,000 Palestinians were arrested during the war in the Gaza Strip. And like I said, many of whom just happened to be at the wrong place and at the wrong time. So a lot of questions remain about their fates and when they'll ever, if ever, they'll be out.
Well, Ahmed, please stay in close touch and let us know if you do hear anything. We would like to hear more from this side, of course, of the story. Always appreciate you joining me.
Thank you.
You bet. And continuing with me here in studio, Michael Ratney. He served as U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia under the Biden administration, as well as the U.S. Consul General in Jerusalem and also special envoy for Syria under President Obama. You've been with me all afternoon listening to all sides, from our correspondents to the president to world leaders, and now even someone who has grown up a Palestinian, is here as an advocate, working as a senior fellow. Your thoughts as you kind of digest everything that we have heard to this moment, your thoughts and your concerns as we move forward.
So listening to all of your guests and actually seeing all these images in Israel as the hostages are released, seeing them and their families, seeing Palestinians joyful that they have a moment of calm after 2 years of violence, seeing regional leaders and global leaders joining with the U.S. president to try to galvanize their energies to make sure this thing never happens again. To see all that, it's not hard. It's hard not to get caught up in the joy of it. You know, certainly joy of the Israelis, joy of the families of these hostages, joy of Palestinians that have endured so much in Gaza. But it's also hard not to be sober about the challenges. This is a ceasefire. It's basically a cessation of hostilities, a hostage release, a prisoner release, and humanitarian aid. I'd like to say it was peace. It's not peace yet. in front of all of us, in front of the Israelis and the Palestinians and all of the regional parties that care about this, is a lot of work. And that includes many of the measures that are on that 20-point plan that the White House released. Creation of a stabilization force to ensure that there's some modicum of security in Gaza. A reconstruction plan that'll cost tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars to allow Palestinians to resume something like normal life. And then ultimately, I think what President Trump heard from all of those regional leaders and all of those European leaders is it can't end here. There has to be some sort of a political pathway, a role for the Palestinian Authority, some pathway for Palestinian statehood to ensure that we don't have a repeat of this in a few years.
And how do you do that? Trump is talking about this peace board that will help create this. I mean, when you hear of that idea, what are your thoughts? Does that make sense? I mean, we've never heard of anything like that before.
Yeah, and I don't want to sound cynical about it. You know, it's easy to see the hostage release, have a global summit, take a victory lap, watch the hostages return to their families, and then move on to other things. It's a complicated world, right? But I think one of the advantages of President Trump meeting with all those global leaders is they're there to remind him that if we want their support in reconstruction and security, that we need to stay on our game, that the United States needs to stay behind this and work with the Israelis to ensure that they do support things that frankly, the Israeli Prime Minister has flatly ruled out, including at times a complete withdrawal from Gaza, or certainly any kind of a role for the Palestinian Authority. So, look, and it would be great to talk at length about all of these political measures, but what we really need right now is something that ensures that a ceasefire and a hostage release is more substantial, that it yields real security for Israelis and Palestinians, and it at least tells Palestinians that there's a pathway to some kind of normal life for them.
Ambassador, thank you.
Thank you.
In a region where we have had little diplomatic success for decades, President Trump appears to have accomplished a generational coup. Stay with us here on ABC News Live. We will have continuing coverage of the historic day in the Middle East, and we will bring you all the breaking developments as they happen. And in our next hour, we will speak with Daniel Sharibi, whose best friend, Yosef Yair Mohana, was finally released today by Hamas after 2 very long years in captivity. We're also tracking a nor'easter slamming parts of the East Coast. Rena?
Well, Kira, I can tell you it is wet and windy here on Rockaway Beach in New York City. And the big threat with this storm is beach erosion and flooding. We'll have the latest coming up.
What does it take to be the most watched newscast in America?
An operation to capture ISIS fighters.
Is this our Combat Operations Center?
We're approaching the gate now. Militants came in from 4 or 5 different directions.
Operational nuclear reactor.
So you have a couple loaded and ready to go. The house is destroyed, but the flag, there's not a tear in it.
Not a tear in it.
How important is this label right here, Made in the USA? Look at your smile. You're proud of this.
I love this.
Great work. Hi. Where are you? Where are you?
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
David, good to meet you.
Ismail? David.
David.
Yes. I'm David Muir.
I know who you are.
You
Watch
do?
you every night.
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast.
Whenever, wherever news breaks, it's so important to always remember that lives are changed. Here in London, in Buffalo, Uvalde, Texas, Edinburgh, Scotland.
From Poland once again tonight. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Ukrainian refugees here in Warsaw.
Do you think you'll ever be able to go back home? We're heading to a small community outside of Mexico City. Splintered houses and splintered lives. The magnitude of the devastation.
You're streaming ABC News Live. Reporting from Rolling Fork, Mississippi.
Santa Fe, New Mexico. Raleigh, North Carolina. The U.S. Capitol. Mayfield, Kentucky. Minneapolis.
Mexico. Tongass National Forest, Alaska.
Getting you behind the stories as they happen. Giving you a front row seat to our world as it plays out in real time. Live. ABC News Live Prime. We'll take you there.
Stream ABC News Live weeknights, America's most honored streaming news program, only on ABC News Live, streaming free right now wherever you stream your news.
We were two perfect little families that are all best friends, but he was crazy. Denise calls me and said that Mike hasn't come home.
There was speculation that he got eaten by an alligator.
She starts an affair with my husband, Brian. It involved decadent sexual behavior.
We don't need to be wiring up soccer moms, but she wanted answers.
My heart is racing. This is where the good stuff starts.
Mr. and Mrs. Murder, only on Hulu.
I did not picture myself surviving through that day.
He was tracking her.
He was everywhere. I heard the squeak of a floorboard. I've been kidnapped. This becomes a fight for my life. And we're all holding our breath. My mind is the only thing that's going to get me out of here. Open the door! This is a horror film.
Stalking Samantha, 13 Years of Terror, only on Hulu.
So glad you're streaming with us. A powerful nor'easter is slamming the East Coast right now, bringing heavy rain, flooding streets, and damaging winds. There is some of what you're seeing there on the Jersey Shore. Both New York and New Jersey declaring states of emergency. Our senior meteorologist, Melissa Griffin, has been tracking it for us. Also, our Rena Roy is at Rockaway Beach in New York. So, Rena, why don't we start with you? Tell us what you're seeing out there.
Yeah, well, Kira, I can tell you it is really just a nasty day out here, right? It is still wet. It is still windy, as it has been for hours. And it's actually high tide right now. If you take a look right behind me, you can see the waves just crashing into the shore. We have seen flooding in some parts of New York City and really up and down the East Coast in several different states. And we just got word a short time ago that unfortunately there has been at least one storm-related death. And it was not too far from where we are right now, about 7 miles away on Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. Sunday morning, officials say that there was a solar panel attached to a carport that was ripped off by a gust of wind. It was carried 20 feet and it hit a 76-year-old woman in the head. She was taken to the hospital and pronounced dead, Kira.
So, Melissa, how much longer is this going to stick around?
Well, that's the problem, Kira, is the storm has been around for at least over 24 hours now, and it continues to pound the coastline. You can see the rain here. It is light in nature, but it's still wet out there. And that onshore flow, these winds that are just streaming right into places like the Jersey Shore, right up to southeastern New England, that's where we have the coastal issues that will continue. Again, as Rena mentioned, it is high tide coming in this afternoon, so we're seeing these coastal flood warnings. During that high tide flooding, where 1 to 3 feet of inundation is possible for places like Delaware, up through New Jersey into Long Island as well. The wind advisory sticking around for parts of Cape Cod. High surf up through Maine, where waves could reach up to 10 feet. So really this coastal storm bringing what is the brunt from places up and down the coast in the Northeast. We're going to see 50-mile-per-hour winds continue through this afternoon from Cape Cod down to the Jersey Shore. 30 to 40-mile-per-hour winds will continue into tonight before finally tomorrow those winds are going to start winding down and we're going to see the storm pulling away. Now with the rain, we're going to see the heaviest rain here in the Cape Cod area just south of Boston. Parts of New Jersey into Long Island could see an additional 1 to 2 inches of rain. But, Kira, for the most part, this storm will continue to pound the coast through tonight before it moves out late Tuesday. Kira.
All right. Melissa, Rena, thank you both. We'll stay in close touch throughout the day. Well, while the world is celebrating a historic moment in peace in the Middle East, back here at home, Democrats and Republicans are still divided as we enter day 13 of the government shutdown, and there's no end in sight. President Trump moved forward with his promise to fire government workers